Ooh, let's rock and roll, ladies and gentlemen. Let's rock and roll. So, it's been a while since we had a live stream. This is the first live stream on the new laptop. I have noticed, though, that we are having some internet issues, and that is out of my control. But I obviously very aware of the feedback that we've been having in regards to picture quality, sound quality, and connectivity. We've had some issues. The old laptop basically died. We do have the new one. So we have the new laptop. It's we've had it now for a couple of weeks, which is good. So hopefully the sound and picture quality is better. It's a smaller screen, so it's actually got a wider angle of the webcam, so you can actually see how messy things are. I haven't made my bed up, but there we go. But we are back, and obviously ready to discuss things. Let's move a few things about and hide a bit of the rubbish mess in here. Right, there we go. So yes, new laptop, same apartment, but new laptop. A lot is going on in the world of sport. Obviously, the NRL games in Vegas have been dominating a lot of the social media sphere. A lot of the headlines in regards to the issues that the NRL have faced and the promotion side of things. It's got people talking. It's got people talking. The American audience has the potential this evening, their time, because it has just turned Saturday over there. Of course, we're 7-8 hours ahead here in the UK, but there is the potential, obviously, for up to 100 million people to access Fox Sports 1 in the US. And so therefore there's the potential for a very large TV audience in the US market. Obviously there's a lot of fans have gone overseas from Australia, New Zealand, England and France. So your traditional rugby league countries have landed in Vegas. Ticket sales are still continuing right up till the end. I think ticket sales have outstripped what was anticipated to begin with by the NRL. I think they'll be quite happy with selling more tickets than they would have predicted. The big talking point, obviously, is the size of the playing surface, not the playing surface itself. It's the size of the dimensions of the pitch being slightly smaller than an NRL pitch. Although, for those players that have had some Super League experience or played in the World Cup, obviously they'll be used to the slightly smaller pitch dimensions or different pitch dimensions, because we have a lot of association football stadiums being used as stadiums, playing surfaces over here in the Super League and in Europe. So there is that, and of course we've got the games tomorrow. Now, obviously, I'll be waking up early tomorrow morning, my time, to watch the games. So I'll be awake at like 2 a.m. my time to watch the opening game, and then I'll watch the second game, which kicks off about 5 a.m. my time. So I'll be up nice and early watching those games. I'm looking forward to them. It's been a very, very long off season with nothing much happening. So there's that. F1 news, obviously, the Christian Horner investigation has concluded. And of course, F1 begins over in the Middle East this weekend. A lot of discussion about the culture within the sport, the lack of transparency in regards to the Red Bull investigation, what the allegations actually were. So there's that. That's been ongoing in the background in regards to pre-season testing and, of course, the opening races this weekend. So there's been a lot of discussion there. And then, of course, we've got the World Endurance Championship is already underway as well. Also, in the same part of the Middle East, the V8 Supercars season has started. There's been issues, obviously, with Erebus and Brody Kostecki and, what's going to happen there. And from the articles I can read, it looks likely that Kostecki is obviously going to want to end his contract and get out of his contract. He may sit out the entire season. He wants to have a contract termination. That's all we know. The Erebus team aren't giving any details away. They've stayed silent the entire time. in regards to what's going on behind the scenes at the championship winning team. They won both the team's championship and the drivers' championship, first time ever for the team. It was a great season on their side of things. Obviously, Shane Van Gisbergen has gone over to NASCAR, and we'll see how he does in the North American sphere of things. He's not the first supercars driver to go over to North American motorsport and give that a crack. So the Shane Van Gisbergen era is over. It's Triple Eight's dominant period over as well, with this Erebus win last year. Although admittedly I didn't watch the last race, but just didn't have the time. But obviously I'll be rewatching, and I'll be watching the Bathurst 500 replay on their YouTube channel. But I didn't watch the end of last season. It was the only race weekend that I actually missed, which is a bit interesting. But the Van Gisbergen exit from the sport and the Brody Kostecki drama, it's never quiet when there's an off season in any sport. Obviously, we've got the Six Nations ongoing right now. Obviously, it's a rest weekend. It's the weekend off before the final 2 weeks of the Six Nations. Ireland look odds-on favourites to go for back-to-back Grand Slams and potentially win every match with bonus point. I don't think that's ever been done since bonus points have been introduced. And I don't think an undefeated back-to-back has been done in the Six Nations era. And a lot of Grand Slams have been won, but I don't think it's been done back-to-back before. I'll be looking into their stats because I don't think Ireland are playing at their best. That's what's generally scary about this entire Six Nations. I don't think Ireland have even peaked. Obviously, disappointing that they went out in regards to getting knocked out in the quarterfinals yet again at a World Cup and failing to progress past the quarterfinal stages again. The French don't look very good. I'm very surprised by how the French haven't particularly played well. They should have lost that game against Italy. They were lucky to win against Scotland, and of course they got well handled by Ireland in the opening weekend. They have really not looked great. There seems to be a lot of issues within the French setup. Obviously, their disappointing exit at the quarterfinal stages at the World Cup last year. Much has been mentioned of that. Now, obviously, DuPont is part of the seven setup for the Olympics. They're taking their home games on the road outside of Paris because of the Olympics and the preparations being made at the Stade de France. So there's a lot of backdrop to that. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on Steve Borthwick as England coach. There's a lot of pressure on Warren Gatland as Wales coach. Scotland, Gregor Townsend, they had to win that game against England. Otherwise, there'd be conjecture around his position. He's been in charge for a while. As this annoying bit of mustache here. Obviously, Gregor Townsend's been in charge with the Scotland setup for a while now. They failed to get out the pool stages at the World Cup, and they haven't really been one of the challenges for the Six Nations. Now, they can still potentially win the Six Nations. It just means they have to beat Ireland, and they have to beat Italy, and win convincingly in both games without giving away losing bonus points to the other teams. And that's going to be very, very interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, they have a habit of blowing leads or not performing for the full 80 minutes. Same with Wales. Wales somehow have lost all three games that are above Italy. Managed to draw their last game. This is where the bonus point starts to raise a few eyebrows with how bonus points in rugby union work. The bonus point structure has been around now for over 20 years, so it's not as if it's a new thing, but it's only recently been adopted by the Six Nations. And also in World Cup play as well, the last couple of tournaments. That's always an interesting backdrop. So we'll have to see how the last 2 weekends play out in March. But it looks very, very likely. Like you'll have very short odds if you are a betting man or woman in regards to Ireland not doing back-to-back Grand Slams with bonus point wins in all 5 games. That could be ridiculous. And I think there will always be talk of their failure to win a Rugby World Cup quarterfinal. But Andy Farrell has now cemented himself as one of the best coaches in the world. He's obviously going to be coaching the Lions tour next year. And obviously, there's a lot of question marks going into the Six Nations, the post-Johnny Sexton era. with Ireland. Who would be the next fly half to be that dominant fly half? And there is a battle for the fly half slot between Crowley and Byrne as the next two. Carberry's is also an option. So there's three, decent young fly halves battling to replace Johnny Sexton, which is a good problem to have. It's a very good problem to have. But the Irish have become a production line in the Northern Hemisphere, much like New Zealand and South Africa in the Southern Hemisphere. So there is that. The FA Cup. Now, I watched a couple of the fifth round games, and I wasn't. I'm not a fan of having the fifth round as on weeknights. Obviously, the discussion around FA Cup replays and how much longer we're going to have them in all rounds if they disappear entirely. This is going on with the backdrop of what's happening in the Premier League with potential points deductions for Chelsea, Man City, Everton, who've also had a points deduction reduced at Nottingham Forest. We've got AFC Rochdale, obviously, facing potential administration, going out of business. Torquay United, former Football League club, currently about to enter administration. We've seen Nuneaton Borough, a former Football League club, I believe, and a non-league club going out of business. So what was predicted when COVID first hit 4 years ago is that a load of clubs will go out of business. The footballing pyramid would be decimated. We are now starting to see the impacts of that being felt 4 years later. And there's a lot of discussion surrounding the state of football finances and the football financial rules and ownership. I mean, look at Reading. That's a disaster. I mean, I work with a lot of Reading fans. One of them really does keep up to date with all the news going on with the club. So every morning when I see him, when we clock in, he'll be saying something else that's happened at Reading where, whatever's going on behind the scenes at the club. They just had another points deduction. Things need to change in regards to football finance and ownership. They do need to change. It's a long overdue change that's required. There's no doubt on that. And it's just a mess. It's an absolute mess in regards to what's going on with the club game at this time. And then you've got FIFA coming out with these, experimental rules and sin bins and 5-minute sin bins and, trying to change the rules yet again, which we don't need, by the way. And it's just an absolute shambles, really. The blue card's now been dropped as a potential rule change. They're going to experiment with the FA Cup potentially as one of the competitions where they experiment with these new rules. We can't even get VAR right, so God knows what's going to happen here. There is a concern about the quality of refereeing, not just in football, but across the board in all professional sports across the world. Obviously, I haven't even started on the Super League yet and what's going on with rugby league in Europe, because that's an absolute shambles. And a lot of fans are really venting their frustrations against the RFL more than anything on the community pages, the rugby league community pages on social media that I'm a member of. There's a lot of real frustration with rugby league fans. They're really not happy at all. It's simmering. We've seen a lot of criticism aimed at the RFL with how they're dealing with foul play, inconsistencies in regards to sin binning, send-offs, suspensions, fines, rescinding of suspensions, rescinding of fines, already changing the remit. The referees aren't good enough. The RFL has been very reactionary to the potential lawsuit. I think all the lawsuit that is pending in regards to how they're dealing with post-player care in regards to former players who are taking legal action against rugby league. I think they're being reactionary. I think we as fans love the combative, gladiatorial nature of the sport. We've already got rid of the shoulder charge. Fighting's basically gone out of the game, which is not always necessarily a bad thing, but ironically, fans kind of love a bit of the old biff. There's a lot of cheap shots within the game anyway. We've seen it with the NRL and Super League and even international games where there are a lot of foul play, niggly foul play, cheap shots. which weren't in the game 20 years ago. It's always been against the rules to smash the opponent in the head. It's just that they've allowed bad tackle technique to get into the sport over a long period of time. And what we now know about concussion, how retrospectively are we going to go back? How retrospectively are we going to go back in regards to looking at not only concussion but all player injuries? How retrospective? Because there has to be like a limitations on this. But players are frustrated with how the game is being officiated. Fans are just giving up. There's great frustration, and then we've got the IMG grading, which I'm not a fan of how it's been implemented and how they're going about it. Personally, I think that's an absolute farcical mess. I really do. I think the way the RFL have brought this IMG in to help grade the clubs. How can the Newcastle Thunder be graded higher than two Super League clubs? Yet they got thumped 100. Was it 108 or 110 nil in the Challenge Cup tie against was it Wakefield? They went out of business. They reformed. It was all academy players. How can they? How can the Newcastle Thunder be ranked higher than Super League clubs? And what is the point of the London Broncos even playing in Super League this season if we're going to be guaranteed to be thrown out of the league because we don't meet criteria, even though the whole premise behind Super League was London Broncos existed before Super League. They were formerly known as Fulham Rugby Football League Club. They founded in the 80s. They played at Craven Cottage. Then they moved around London. But when Super League was brought in, they made a big thing about making sure London had a team. And they, gave them a bit of leeway. What is the RFL trying to do here? Yes, the majority of players and fans live in the M62 corridor. We can all accept that. But the World Cup lost money. I don't think was a great spectacle on a fan point of view. I'm being honest. I didn't mind. It was good to see like Greece and Jamaica and some of the smaller nations getting, to play on the big stage. And we got to see some great talent that's been overlooked by the Super League and by the NRL in regards to these players are stuck in the Championship or reserve grade or New South Wales and Queensland Cup, and they were putting themselves on the radar for a potential expansion team or teams down the line in the next couple of years in the NRL. But when you got this grading system that states by 2025 we want to have all the Super League clubs plus as many Championship clubs as possible reaching Grade A standard, it's impossible. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. The fact that 3 of the Super League clubs will not be getting a home game broadcast on the BBC on the free-to-air package that's been agreed with the TV package this season is a joke. So that's London, Huddersfield, and Hull, not Hull KR, Hull. So 3 Super League clubs will not get any home matches broadcast on the free-to-air side of the TV package this season, unless those that are already in getting home games out of the 15 are also broadcast on the Challenge Cup broadcasts. So London, Hull, and Huddersfield have to hope that, let's say, St Helens get all the way to the final against Wigan, for example, which will be what we as fans don't want to see because they always get to the bloody final. Apart from last season, it's always St Helens and Wigan being one, or Leeds or Warrington being one of the teams contesting the Challenge Cup final in the last God knows how long, which shows how uncompetitive rugby league actually is in the Northern Hemisphere. You look at the NRL. Yes, Penrith have been in the last 4 grand finals, but they played 4 different opponents in those grand finals. Let that sink in. And 2 of their 4 opponents didn't make the top 8 the following season. Let that sink in. That is true. South Sydney and Parramatta in the following seasons did not make the top 8 in a season or 2 seasons following their grand final appearance. Melbourne haven't been back. So Penrith, while they've won 3 out of the last 4, 3 in a row, while they haven't won the World Club Challenge, which is another debate altogether, their opponents in those grand finals have not been the same. It's been 4 different teams that they have played against. They played Brisbane, they played Parramatta, they played South Sydney and Melbourne. And so, yeah, Penrith are the top dogs. 4 different sides have challenged them to be top dog. Now, they've had a 75% win rate in grand finals, with this current crop of players. Yeah, it has been a while. Obviously, I'm going to say it's now that the old laptop just could not cope with live streams anymore. It could barely cope with doing video uploads. It reached its life expired. It still turns on. I've still got to take a couple of passwords off it and cancel my antivirus subscription. So I still have the old laptop. I just haven't turned it on for a couple of weeks. It had really died. It's down there somewhere. It had basically life expired. It reached the end of its, well, the components just had life expired. It's like with anything mechanical or electronical, you will have to replace components every now and then, or they will have a life expiry date. And it had got a year longer than the hard drive, motherboard, RAM, and graphics card were meant to. I looked at the specs on it, and it was meant to have died a year ago. So, which it did, and we had to bring it back to life a few times. So it lasted longer than expected, but it had been going for 6 years. It finally packed in. So we got the Chromebook, and that will be fully paid off tomorrow because I owe me dear mum half the value of the Chromebook. So I'm paying for half of it. My mum's paid for the other half, although she has actually already paid for it. Did it one payment, no installment. So I actually own my new laptop. And it's a Chromebook, so it's a slightly different operating system. The keyboard's different, which is kind of a bit of fun. So that's what's been going on behind the scenes. You will have noticed the picture quality's changed, the sound quality's changed. We're in full HD now. So it takes a little bit longer in regards to the full HD upload being there, but we're now HD quality, which is something that the old laptops didn't have. The webcam kept on installing itself. So basically, channel related, but not channel related. The equipment just kept failing. And yeah, so live streams just became undoable by the end. They just did not work. There was constant issues with connectivity, with picture quality, sound quality, and so we had to stop doing live streams. I think around Christmas. So it's been a good 3 months since we've done a live stream. Still getting used to the new setup. Obviously, Google Chrome, the keyboard's different. There's no number pad. There's no caps lock. There's no delete buttons. You can't do Control Alt Delete doesn't exist anymore. I got so used to using Control Alt Delete and Alt F4 and all the other various Windows shortcuts. Get onto Task Manager and onto the various Task Manager options. Don't have to do that anymore. It's weird. So I've got this muscle memory from the last year and a bit of having to restart and reprogram things and try and work with workarounds around the issues that we had. But another good thing is inbuilt antivirus, so I don't have to pay money for a product that actually fights against the operating system, which is fantastic. Are you alarmed by footballers' antics off the field? I think in all sports, we've seen a lot of incidents of criminality in regards not only to what Dani Alves has been convicted of, but Quincy, what's his name? Promise. Robinho is another one. Obviously, the ongoing issues facing, Mason Greenwood, those charges, while they've basically been shelved, he's not out of the woods yet. I don't even know who Quincy Promise is, for example, but it's not just association football. It's rugby league, it's rugby union, it's cricket, motorsport. We've seen allegations of various things. Obviously, the Christian Horner situation, we don't know what's gone on at Red Bull, but they've cleared him of any wrongdoing. But there was a lot of talk whilst that investigation was ongoing, and he was out the door. We've seen it in the NFL. We've seen it in the NHL. There's a big thing with Hockey Canada at the moment with multiple players having to surrender to police in Ontario. It's an ongoing thing. We've got various allegations of what these guys have been accused of. And of course, Dani Alves, we've seen it in rugby union. There was a Fijian player, he's gone to prison. Rugby league, there's always something happening in the off season, be it drunk and assault, drink. I mean, Zach Hardacre has been done for drink driving. Again, yeah, there was drugs. It's something that is now becoming so commonplace with off-field dramas. that we're not shocked by it anymore. It doesn't matter what the offence is or what they're accused of. We've had domestic violence allegations all the way through to murder with Aaron Hernandez in the NFL. We're getting so used to this now, so used to this with these negative headlines that it doesn't shock people anymore. It just doesn't. And now with social media as it is, and the digital media being 24 hour, even the news cycle being 24 hour with all these 24-hour news stations, satellite TV, the internet. They don't even have to be well-known, high-profile players. The Danny Alves one. Look, this does speak to the culture within dressing rooms as well. It does speak to a complete and utter, it's sort of an air of arrogance and entitlement. I've always said this over many, many, many years, especially since I've had this channel, that it's a privilege and a right to be a professional athlete. You have to work hard to get there. And when you are there, you are seen as a public figure, and therefore you are seen as a role model. And a lot of these athletes do come from very poor, working class, deprived backgrounds. And they get thrown a lot of money very early for their socio-economic status. And they're put upon this pedestal. I always go back to Diego Maradona and Paul Gascoigne in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Right? I always go back to George Best. I always go back to the previous generation. And this is where we start to see this. We hear about the antics, the old drinking antics and partying antics, and some of the away trips and test tours like the old Lions tours with rugby union and the Australian kangaroo tours around the world. And I do listen to a lot of these podcasts, and a lot of the ex-players and older players get interviewed on these podcasts. And I've been listening to a lot of rugby. I've been listening to the James Graham Buy Round podcast, and he's interviewed, I think, 80-odd individuals. Some of them are two-parters, but he's interviewed about 80-odd former and current players and former and current coaches and administrators within rugby league. And a lot of it comes back to the drinking stories, and a lot of it comes back to the antics on overseas trips and in off-season trips and pre-season training. And it genuinely worries me that they're saying, "Oh, the culture's changed. The culture's changed." I don't think it has. I think social media has changed how we access the information, but I think the antics are still exact. I mean, Kyle Walker's been outed as a bit of a love rat, but we already knew that. So the Kyle Walker situation with allegations about his private life and having a second secret family, and his and sort of his antics, and it doesn't surprise me. I'm alarmed, but I'm not surprised. But it's become so commonplace now with allegations and sometimes even proven in a court of law that pro athletes misbehave a lot. But it's also very noticeable that a lot of professional and even semi-pro athletes are what we would class as neurodivergent. So I've got ADHD. I have ADHD or ADD. A lot of them come under what, right now they'll be given Ritalin or Adderall or some kind of mood stabilizing dopamine either supplement to balance their dopamine levels. They enjoy risky behaviors. You look at ice hockey players, rugby league players, NFL players, all that kind of stuff. Their job is to run into people at quite high velocity and bash the crap out of each other. It takes a certain type of individual to be willing, for rugby league and rugby union, for example, 80 minutes, ice hockey 60 minutes, to basically beat the shit out of someone for that entire period of time, and then afterwards go for a beer or go for a meal. It's quite commonplace in those sports that post-game you go for a post-match meal with the opposition, depending, maybe not the NHL, but mostly in the European leagues, and Australian leagues, you beat the crap out of each other during the match, and then after the match, you shake hands, you go down the pub, or you go to a restaurant or a cafe and you have a meal together. But you've spent the best part of the previous week building up to the game. You beat the crappy out of each other at the game, and then post game you go and socialise together. Generally speaking. But some of the stories that come out, especially about rugby league and some of the drinking antics there, I mean, Jesus Christ, it's more than just drinking antics. There's a lot of drug misuse as well. Cricket's the same. Obviously, we had the Ben Stokes and Alex Hales incident a few years back. Yeah, I mean, some of I remember, God, when I first started the channel, one of my old-time subscribers, he was still subscribed to the channel. He occasionally views the content and leaves a comment every now and then. He's an Australian. He's from the bush. He's from the rural areas, I think, of New South Wales or the state of Victoria. And he left a comment saying the grog goes in, the brains go out. There is this boozy, laddish, I wouldn't say working class, because even the upper classes get pissed quite a bit, but there seems to be a relationship, an unhealthy relationship, with excessive drink. Very excessive, alcohol consumption. And then the fallout from that. The 2018-2019 Rugby League off-season, I think, was it 2018, 2019? Was it 2017, 2018? When we had, Greg Inglis, I think it was 2018. Greg Inglis, drink driving, the Jack de Belin, no fault, no stand down saga that went on for the best part of 2.5, 3 years, multiple other, Ben Barber. The NRL had a really bad PR nightmare. And I think this was a contributing factor to Todd Greenberg not getting his contract renewed, was what happened before COVID. And the reactionary response to a lot of bad press in regards to player misbehaviour in the off-season. Mad Mondays have been heavily criticised with when players are head at the end of the season and some of the antics that we do know goes on. So yeah, there is that. Pogba getting banned doesn't surprise me, because there's always some drama with Pogba. I've got to enjoy a Monster. If I ever get sponsored, it will be by Monster or Pringles or something, because I'm always munching on Pringles and I'm always drinking, especially Pipeline Punch. Fantastic. Actually got fruit juice in it. Pogba getting banned, I mean, it's becoming a bit more prevalent now in association football, performance-enhancing misuse. Most is to do with therapeutic use exemptions and manipulate. I mean, I think there was a rumour going around, or an allegation, and an article that basically suggested the whole Liverpool squad, 75% of them were, chronically asthmatic and couldn't climb, a flight of stairs without having an asthma attack. The amount of asthma medication they were suddenly getting during their, I think was it their Champions League winning season or their Premier League winning season under Jurgen Klopp. So there was a lot of finger pointing at Liverpool then. We can discuss, I think Jaap Stam got a drugs ban back in the day when he was either a Man United or Lazio player. I seem to remember Rio Ferdinand got a ban for missing an in-season drugs test. So for some reason, my back is really buggered at the moment. So I've got to, there was allegations that Liverpool, but other clubs as well, but Liverpool, there was a Freedom of Information request or some kind of article in a, I forget who wrote the article and all that, but there was allegations. Give us a second. Allegations about Liverpool Football Club about 3-4 years ago. Since I've lived in this apartment, I think. Let me just get comfortable. There were allegations circulating a good couple of years ago in the aftermath of there we go. In the aftermath, God, that is bright, isn't it? Do I adjust the light? I can live with the light. No, there were allegations that were swirling around about the use of therapeutic use exemptions. Now, what that means is you could be a player and you have constant inflammation in your shoulder or your knees, for example, let's go with that, and you need to have cortisone injections, which is a steroid, and it's designed to reduce inflammation. Now, I know a couple of rugby league players have osteoarthritis, so that's Jack Bird and Brad Parker, for example. Their knees are buggered. The fact that they are still playing through the pain barrier, they should be, retired and having, I wouldn't say corrective surgery, but they would have to have, when they retire, they're going to have a lot of medical treatment to live comfortably. So Jack Bird, for example, he was a teenager when they found out he had osteoarthritis or whatever, a severe form of arthritis at a very young age, because he had an injury and it triggered it. And he has to go through a regular regime of injections and medications and then, operations to keep playing. Brad Park, who plays for the Miami Seagulls, same thing. So these two players I know have to have a therapeutic use exemption, otherwise they are, really, really unwell. For them to play at elite level with that going on, and Jack Bird's been an Origin player as well, for them to play at an elite level with those kind of health conditions, okay, that's one thing. But when you don't require the medication, you shouldn't be allowed to have a therapeutic use exemption. In regards to the SNUS, yeah, that's been around since Jamie Vardy was at the peak of his powers back in 2015, 2016, 2017. That's not a new thing. Nicotine is known to be a performance enhancer in the short to medium term. Long term, it obviously is not very good for your health. And as a smoker, I can definitely tell you it's not good for your health. If you remember the American Pie film, Stifler's mum, Jennifer Coolidge, in the second one, when she pulls up right at the end of the film. Now, this is not spoiler related, but it's a true story. When she pulls up right at the end of the film in a Mercedes convertible and she's asking for directions to the lake, they had to do so many takes for that one scene where Finchy basically is giving her directions to get the wrong way to pick him up so they can continue their affair. Obviously, she's smoking, and she's smoking real cigarettes, and she ended up with nicotine poisoning. They had so many outtakes for that they had to do over several days, and of course, she had to basically chain smoke. And she ended up with nicotine poisoning, and she was really ill, and she had to, go to hospital and go on a drip and have medical attention. She ended up with nicotine poisoning. So some of these performance-enhancing techniques that are used, and of course, energy drinks, they're not banned. A lot of these substances aren't on the ban list because, for whatever reason, but there have been studies showing that caffeine can improve concentration in the short term. Nicotine can improve concentration in the short term. They can also enhance aerobic respiration. Some of these things occur naturally in various foods. And then we have all these formulas, these protein type shakes where they put vitamins and these other supplements that again are badly regulated, and a lot of them are not on the ban list. Some have now been put on the ban list, and the unknown health, we know about the health consequences with caffeine. More studies have been done. We know about the health consequences with nicotine-based products. And we know about some of the consequences when you're using medical steroids under these therapeutic use exemptions. They can be carcinogenic. They can have other issues as well. Vardy admitted live to her taking 2 Red Bulls for each game. Yeah, because they're not a banned substance. It's not a banned substance. And because he's probably got a very, very high metabolism, probably doesn't affect him as much as someone who has a low metabolism. But yes, no, he did admit that was his pre-game regime. That was part of it. He probably has ADHD, like a lot of athletes do. And I found with caffeine that I function better with caffeine and sweet chocolate. White chocolate they're my things that ironically help with my dopamine levels. And it's very noticeable. If I don't have a caffeinated drink and I have something like a Fanta or a Lipton iced tea, for example, or one of the other iced tea, you can get. It's sort of a placebo effect, but I don't get the same balancing. But no, that's part of his pre-match routine. I don't know if he still does it, but yeah, he openly admitted to it. But caffeine is not on the banned list. There are probably other chemicals and ingredients in energy drinks, depending on the manufacturer and the brand, that probably do have items that would be on the prescribed banned list that the World Anti-Doping Agency and UK Anti-Doping, for example, in this country, or Australian Anti-Doping in Australia, or the US Anti-Doping have. I'm just using them as examples on their prescribed banned list, and so that's something. Doping is, I think, the Pogba situation. I mean, we started with discussing Paul Pogba. I mean, and they're now lengthening the bans. I think there was that young teenage Russian ice skater who's just had a ban because she took her granddad's heart medication, which is a similar case to Maria Sharapova, and she's facing a lengthy suspension. Sports that you wouldn't expect to have doping as part of their issues are now having doping allegations. So ice skating, I wouldn't have thought ice skating would have been a doping issue. I wouldn't say a scandal, but I suppose it could. But it's reached figure skating. Now, I would expect ice hockey to have performance enhancers like steroids and muscle growth and muscle hormone kind of stuff, because of the physical nature of the sport in regards to you're beating the crap out of each other for 60 minutes plus overtime and shootouts, not figure skating. But it's reached figure skating. In regards to, will Pogba get it overturned or reduced on appeal? I don't know. But we're talking about doping. Bronson Sherry is now back in the NRL after his stint on the sidelines. He's obviously now with the Canterbury Bulldogs. Christ, he looks like a unit. He's definitely. I wouldn't be surprised if Bronson Sherry is still playing the system. He was very blatant in his lack of contrition in regards to getting caught. He looks huge. I mean, he looks big. Well, caffeine would be hard to ban. It would be. It would be. You're basically saying to the coaches, you can't have your coffee and have your teacup thrown at the wall moment. Certain managers would not cope without the fact that the like companies like Monster, there's the logo, Monster, Red Bull, and their derivatives, Coca-Cola, Pepsi. I'm trying to think of some other real big soft drink. Lucozade, although Lucozade, does it contain caffeine, or does it just? I think it does it. I'm trying to think of some other ones as well. There's some smaller independents. You've got Boost, you've got the in-store brands, Mountain Dew. The fact that so many of these soft drink companies and energy drink companies are major sponsors for professional sport. We're talking major sponsors of professional sport. They bring a lot of money into professional sport, be it motorsport all the way through to association football, with ice hockey, rugby league. You've got Powerade, you've got Gatorade, you've got Monster and their brands, you've got Red Bull and their brand, Coca-Cola, Pepsi. Wide range. You've got Bass, which is it Bass? No, Bar, who do make Iron Brew and the other. You've got bubblegum flavour. The makers of Iron Brew and other soft drinks. It's a UK-based one of the biggest soft drinks companies in the world, based in Scotland. Because of the amount of sponsorship they have and the money they pump into professional sport, be it motorsport to the team sports to individual athletes being sponsored, for them to then suddenly be put on the banned list, this is why the doping agencies don't do it. This is where, they realise that massive loss of income is going to be huge. Huge. This is where some sports really struggled post-tobacco sponsorship. And this is where the gambling sponsorship comes in. Which is more insidious? Which is more damaging for society? Now we're getting, you get rid of the tobacco sponsorship, you limit the amount of alcohol sponsorship. It's still there, but you limit it. Certain countries it's banned, certain countries it's not, but it's limited. You look at the food and beverage industry, and I'm going to go back to these guys. Monster, big sponsor in motorsport, especially the extreme sports and winter sport. Massive sponsor. Same with Red Bull. I mean, Red Bull, they own multiple sports teams, and the contribution of professional sport to a local economy is huge, massive. They can't ban caffeine. If they were, I don't think there's enough corporate money out there at the moment, spare, floating around with what's going on economically globally, to plug the gap in lost sponsors and the loss of revenues that are linked to the food and beverage industry, which is already struggling at the moment anyway. There's a lot of issues facing the food and beverage industry right now, which are contributing to potentially Red Bull maybe pulling out of certain events. And Monster, I mean, they may go, we can't afford to sponsor this team anymore. We may have to pull out. But yeah, that's a massive thing. But we've seen the discussion around gambling sponsorship and whether there's too much. And now with the NRL going to Las Vegas, and the reliance that rugby league as a sport has, both in the NRL and Super League, on gambling firms sponsoring Challenge Cup, Super League, and being team sponsors for a lot of clubs, you take that revenue away. Rugby league as a sport is in dire straits. We're having the discussion around club football and limiting and reducing the reliance on gambling firms for sponsorship. Again, you take that revenue stream away or limit that revenue stream, it's going to be harder for them to be financially self-sufficient. So it's all interlinked. But these are good points being raised. In regards to athlete antics away from sport being high profile and negative. In more recent times, there's been a lot of high-profile incidents, and social media has fueled the fire in regards to speculation surrounding what goes on and athlete misbehaviour. I think we have again. It speaks to the culture within dressing rooms, within the sport, that is not being addressed, and a lot of pressure is being put upon professional sport to be more transparent, clean up their acts, and reform themselves. There is a lot of these negative headlines, are becoming so commonplace now that, again, we're not shocked anymore. We're not shocked about allegations of domestic violence, assault, drink driving, other crimes, murder even. We're not shocked when a professional athlete does it anymore. I've said before, there's a website dedicated to NFL players who are facing criminal charges, and it lists how many players are under investigation, awaiting trial, awaiting sentencing for a variety of offences, ranging from simple possession charges for controlled substances and recreational drugs, all the way through to murder and firearms offences, and everything in between. And that is an indictment of where we are in regards to the attitudes towards this kind of thing. I've noticed as well when I look at my analytics, and I look at the age demographics, and I look at gender demographics, who's actually watching my content. It's very surprising how few women watch my content. On the other channel, it's different. On the History Boffin, it's completely different because of looking at history and urban exploring. It's completely different. But in regards to sport, it is very, very striking how few women are viewing, and it's also very striking that the age demographics. Very, very striking. There's lengthy periods where no one over the age of 35 is watching. And then when something controversial happens, for example, Paul Kent coming back to co-host NRL 360 as a co-host, as soon as I found out about that, made the content, it was a couple of weeks ago, the older demographics, suddenly there's a load of viewership again. So something controversial, suddenly older people will, start watching, start engaging, and start having and leaving comments and having their say on things. The ongoing Joe Barton saga, because he constantly is going after, especially women in the media, constantly going after administrators, journalists, and broadcasters. And that is quite striking. And a lot of people on social media seem to be going, "Oh, Joe Barton's got it right." Now, I'm critical of the quality of journalism, not the gender of the journalist. I'm critical of the quality of commentators, not the gender. There are plenty of male sports journalists and commentators who are absolutely hopeless at their job. Joe Barton is one of them. He's never a great pundit. When he was, given the option to do a bit of commentary and a bit of punditry, he was crap. Wasn't a particularly good manager. He wasn't even a particularly decent player. He is not a particularly likable individual. I think he went to prison for assault. His brother's in prison for a brutal, racist, aggravated murder. He doesn't come from a very nice background. But the Joe Barton, look, Eni Aluko, well, she's not a great commentator or pundit. I'm being honest about that. The fact that she's a woman, and she's a woman from an ethnic minority. I can't even use that term anymore. She's from an African background, Nigerian parents. God, she's an easy target for Joe Barton to spout his views. And sadly, I'm a member of certain sports sports groups on social media, and I always post historical stuff and funny memes. But what I'm finding relates back to what we've seen with the allegations against high-profile athletes with misbehaviour. Is there is a culture. There is a culture there, which is toxic as hell. It's not been called out. If you call it out, you get the abuse. But Joey Barton is now the mouthpiece for a lot of pretty grotty individuals. I'm critical of Eni Aluko because I don't think she's a very good pundit or commentator or journalist. That's where I'm critical. I've always been critical. I don't think she was even a very good player. She helped get a manager sacked. Even though they got sacked for something else, but because she wasn't getting picked anymore because she wasn't good enough. Simple. If you're not good enough, you don't get picked for international sport. But she constantly complains about everything. She can't get her facts and figures right, and it's painful listening to someone who claims should be an expert because they're involved in the sport. She's not very good. But for me, it's got nothing to do with her background, the colour of her skin, or her gender. She's just not very good at her job. But I could say the same about a whole host of male pundits, presenters, and commentators. The quality of sports journalism is not very good at the moment. I think Jake Humphrey, God, how he can justify his salary is beyond me. Some of the players like McManaman and Carrot, God, I've seen them play. I remember watching them play. They weren't particularly consistent enough for me. But, you know, they are pretty dreadful. The state of Sky Sports right now, I mean, I'm not a fan of Sky Sports, is shocking. Gabby Bonglahor, you know, God, how he's got Sinclair and others on TalkSport and on TV are dreadful. God, there are some. I think what we are seeing is it's the same in cricket. I think we've lost something with cricket commentary, motorsport. I mean, look, I think we're seeing decisions taken where broadcasters, the mainstream media, are pandering to a very small minority of people, and they're putting people in positions who just aren't very good. They're either replacing really competent journalists and broadcasters and commentators because of their age, which I think is wrong. I think it should be up to the commentator or the journalist to go, you know what, it's time for me to retire. I feel I can't give any more energy to the role. I feel sorry for people like Sue Barker, forced out by the BBC, although she claimed she was retiring. I think that's ageism. I think she was very, very good at Wimbledon. I think she was very, very good on Question of Sport. I think that was unfair on Sue Barker. We see less of Claire Balding now than we used to. I think her roles are getting diminished. And these are, you know, positive female role models in regards to commentary and sports journalism. I think they're slightly getting forced out. And I think age is a big part of that. I mean, Adrian Giles, you know, with his West Midlands Black Country accent and the fact that he's a West Brom tragic, we haven't really seen him in a journalistic presenting or commentary capacity for a while. I think it was after the 2014 Football World Cup. So the last decade or so, he sort of disappeared from the conversation. Whether that's right or wrong, I thought he was half decent. We've obviously seen the massive sweeping changes to Soccer Saturday on Sky, the lineup panel changes, and you know, people have been basically forced out of Sky Sports. Obviously, Jeff Stelling has ended up at TalkSport and on a part-time basis, but he was basically ushered out the door. Obviously, Chris Kamara's health has basically ended his career. They were a great duo. They made Saturday viewing bearable. Obviously, Letitia for being outspoken, and he's given interviews on various independent podcasts about his departure from Sky. We've obviously seen what's happened with Dean Saunders with his off radio and off TV antics, with his drink driving convictions. Trevor Sinclair's had his issues. Look what happened to Ron Atkinson. He basically sacked himself. But and we're talking about the male journalists and commentators. Obviously, Soccer AM's gone. And we can argue the pros and cons about the axing of that program, but it definitely lost its way. But at the same time, viewing habits have massively changed over the last 25, 30 years. Massively changed. At the same time, when I look at social media and I look at the comments and the posts on social media, there's having dark humour, and I have a very dark sense of humour, and then there's deliberate and willful and generally quite vile content on there. And there's a reason why I got rid of my Twitter account. There's a reason why I don't post anything serious on Facebook if I can avoid it. And then I'm part of humour groups, but even some of these humour groups where you share funny memes and funny sports memes, they're being overtaken in the last couple of months, last year or so, by a toxic, very toxic, vile element, which I would basically label as right wing, and quite divisive and quite extreme. And I engage with these mostly funny sport fan groups less and less. It's definitely over the last year or so become really quite an uncomfortable and nasty environment, where before it was just people sharing quite funny humour, really. It's slowly become based upon gender, race, nationality, backgrounds, and it's become really nasty, nasty atmosphere that when you try and call it out, you get harassed online. So I feel a lot of sympathy with these high profile players and journalists. And I think we need to have a real hard look at ourselves and a hard look at the sports relationship with social media. I definitely think that needs to be looked at. I think we need to have a discussion about it. We need to have a definite hard look at the relationship between professional sport and social media. I think there's definitely a very toxic relationship there, and I don't think I don't think we as a society are dealing with and let me just get that sorted. Basically, I'm now going to be reading comments off just both my phone and the laptop, so we're going to try and work with that. But no, I definitely think there's a massive problem with the relationship between sports and social media, especially in more recent years. I think in the build up to the pandemic and since the pandemic has gone down a very, very dark path. I have a lot of sympathy for athletes when they're getting hounded on social media and they receive all the hate, but also the commentators, the journalists, the pundits, the media personalities, that they face real, in my opinion, real nasty, real nasty abuse on a daily basis, and it, to me, cannot continue in the vein that is going on. It just can't. We can't continue in the way we are. I just I can't see it being healthy in any way. We've seen multiple athletes at various points say, oh, I've got to come off social media. I'm deleting my socials. I'm taking a step back from social media for a variety of reasons. We've seen multiple sports teams tell their players to come off social media at times. We've seen journalists and copied as well. It's definitely something that is an ongoing issue. We've seen what happened surrounding Mason Greenwood, for example. What happened surrounding other um, other athletes and high profile people within the world of sport. There's there's definitely, in my opinion, the relationship is soured. Now, I remember when I first had a Twitter account, and we're talking 2012 Olympics, around the 2012 Olympics, around that period, and it gave really good access to the athletes. I mean, they were engaging with the fans on a different level outside of press conferences and autograph sessions and fan days. It really, you could engage with them on a positive note. And I think what's happened since over the last decade and a half, it's deteriorated rapidly. Um, like Harry Maguire, for example, I feel sorry for Harry Maguire and the abuse he faces on a daily basis. And I know his time at Man United has not been a good spell for him as a player. What's the pass mark for tomorrow, Las Vegas doubleheader crowd? I think they've already surpassed 50,000 tickets now. When I was watching NRL 360 when I woke up early hours our time, so we're talking evening Australia, I think it's higher than that. I think it's potentially as high as 55,000. We've got 12 hours until the second game kicks off, so we've got about 9.5 hours till kickoff. It'd be kicking off about 2:45 our time, I think. So we've still got time for more tickets to be sold. Obviously, there's the time difference. So I don't know if we're 7 or 8 hours ahead of Vegas. I don't know if they're on Central or Pacific time zone because you've got Mountain Time as well. So you've got the half-hour time zones. The US gets weird when you're in the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Nevadas kind of thing. Once you get west of the Mississippi, the time zones you've got Eastern Standard, Central, and then you get Mountain, and then Pacific. Then there's some half time zones in there as well, which get really bizarre. So they're either 7 or 8 hours behind us. So right now it's morning in Las Vegas. What's the pass mark for crowd? I think we could have near capacity tomorrow. We generally could. I know approximately they're approximating somewhere around 20 to 25,000 Australians, Kiwis, us Poms, and some Frenchies have gone over. So proper rugby league fans from the traditional locations, the big four nations when it comes to rugby league internationally have gone over. There's some South Sea Islanders in there, some Tongans, Fijians, Samoans, and all that. But there's people from around the world have gone over there. Now, the big talking points, the pitch dimensions. We're talking 5 meters shorter and I think a couple of meters narrower than your standard NRL pitch. Now, over here, obviously in the Super League and Championship in League One, we have different pitch sizes. There's no standardised pitch size here in European Rugby League, whereas in Australia, all pitches are to a standard size. You have to be that size, and it's always that size. So they've got pitch standardization in the NRL. So a lot of these players, except those who played in Super League and played International Rugby League, will not have played on a pitch of differing dimensions to an NRL playing surface. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But, the temperatures in Vegas, actually, I've been following. I follow a couple of other channels that are, look at the weather and earthquakes. I'm a big fan of geography anyway, so anything geographical is interesting to me. The weather's the west coast of the US and Canada. The temperatures have dropped. There's a lot of rain, a lot of snow, and the wind's picked up. Now, Las Vegas sits in a basin, in a desert basin, and you've got mountain ranges that are part of the main Rocky Mountain chain, but you've got sub-ranges like the Sierra Nevadas, for example, and there's a few other mountain ranges that surround the Vegas area. And they're in this sort of flat, shallow valley. And they've got mountain ranges surrounding Clark County in southern Nevada. And the geography of Nevada is really bizarre. I'm not going to go into it, but the weather has changed. Now, yes, they're playing in the indoor Allegiant Stadium. They're not playing in the outdoor University Stadium, and I think that's a good thing. Although they would have sold out the University Stadium, no doubt, but Allegiant is bigger. Got the dome, weather climatic controlled. I don't think they open the roof at all. I think the roof is permanent. There's no opening, but regardless. So they're playing indoors. They're playing in a roofed stadium. The pitch has been wheeled in. So it's climate controlled indoor stadium. We can debate the pros and cons of that. The pros, obviously, the atmosphere is better because it contains the noise. The cons is it gets humid when you play indoors. And it can have an impact on the playing surface. So the second game, for example, the Roosters Broncos game, I mean, that playing surface could cut up. We don't know. It could be mangled. And there's going to be a lot of humidity inside the stadium, even though they have the climate control. You look at the Millennium Stadium in Carnival Principality, for example, and the Sapporo Dome in Japan. You get that humidity inside because there's no breeze, there's no wind, there's the evaporation, condensation. Basically, you get dew, you get that kind of damp kind of spring autumn dew you get on the early summer dew you get on the grass. That's going to impact handling. That's going to impact the playing surface because they will water the pitch before play, and then that moisture, which would generally evaporate, what doesn't sink into the turf, will generally evaporate in the desert heat. Can't. So the players are going to be out there. You've got thousands of fans inside. That impacts the climate, obviously, with heat given off by human bodies. It's called respiration. It's the thing. You will have the sun beating down on the building, and the moisture can't escape. So what you end up with is this damp playing surface, which makes the ball greasy. And then you have the humidity around that, which impacts how the game is played, the flight of the ball. That's why they don't play cricket indoors often, because it impacts the swing on the ball unnaturally. There's no breeze, so it's going to be very, very humid inside, which will impact the play. Now, both these sides, both these games, these teams haven't really had a full 80 minutes under their belts with their starting first grade lineups. We're going to see some players gassed. We're going to see a lot of fatigue. It's going to be a defensive battle. It's not going to be expansive with the narrowness and the shortness of the field. It's going to be brutality. It's going to be interesting. I think we're going to see an origin level of intensity that cannot be sustained. So we could see the first 20 minutes will be brutal, and then we start seeing the gaps appear up the middle, not in the wide areas. The outside backs of all four teams, I don't see we'll see a lot of the ball in general play unless they're doing kick returns. We may see a different style of kicking. Lower kicks, shorter kicks, more chip and chasing rather than bombs and grubbers. Crossfields, we are going to see the outside backs potentially get less of the ball than they would normally get. And we're going to see them basically assisting their forward packs through the middle. So we're going to see players who we would normally expect to be on, wide plays and in open play getting the ball in regards to on, let's say, third or fourth tackle, maybe fifth tackle, creating overlaps, not getting that opportunity, having to come in field to get work. And they're going to have a lot more carries than through the middle, down the edges. We may see some short side plays. We may see some special set plays that the teams have been working on. So we'll see. Well, the US, yeah, they are going to be interesting. But the fact that both games are going to be shown at prime time, early evening slot in the US on Fox Sports 1, which is the biggest sports channel in the US other than the ESPN network for viewership. 100 million people have access to Fox Sports, and they're choosing the flagship channel and the prime time viewing slots to broadcast. That is one of the success stories, I think, already of Andrew Abdo and Peter Volandis and Andrew Abdo's experience with the commercial aspect of business and the commercial aspect of sport. Andrew Abdo got into the NRL by working in the commercial division, and then obviously he replaced Greenberg as head. That's Andrew Abdo, the businessman, doing good business and signing some good contracts with the broadcaster. Now, the viewing figures themselves, I don't expect all 100 million sports fans who subscribe to Fox Sports in the US to be viewing. If that was to happen, that would be ridiculous. That would be Super Bowl levels of viewership. Not going to happen. But if the NRL could get 5, 10, 15, 20, even 25 million, anywhere between 5 and 25 million, depending on which game, because fans may think there's only one game on and only watch the one game rather than both. That would be interesting. But looking at how the NRL have gone about really breaking the bank in regards to the promotion and the advertising and the the ad campaigns on the various media formats. So we're going TV, radio, billboards, online, social media. So the Russell Crowe video, for example, through the NRL's YouTube channel in partnership, they've gone big in recent weeks. Now, obviously, having the doubleheader a couple of weeks after the Super Bowl, I think it's difficult with the way that the season structure, with the pre-season, the off-season, the post-season, all that kind of stuff, and how you have to have time off to see how that works. Any US Major League sports games on at the same time? Well, baseball season hasn't started yet, so they'll be competing against the NHL and the NBA for the team sports. NASCAR has got a race event at Vegas Speedway. So you've got the Truck Series, the Infinity, and the main Cup Series taking place right now as well. IMSA is, I think, next weekend or the weekend after. So the sports car racing returns, endurance racing returns, I think, in a week or two's time. F1, the American races are later in the year. So you're looking at the NHL and the NBA as the team sports that you're competing against. The Golden Knights have great attendance figures in Vegas. Actually, let's have a look when the next Vegas Golden Knights home game is, because they play just up the road at T-Mobile. So let's have a look. It's going to be interesting. I just want to double check when the Vegas Golden Knights next game is. So Vegas, Golden Knights versus Sabres. March the 3rd. Ooh. Right. It looks like the Golden Knights are actually playing on the road at the moment. This is very cheeky how the NHL and the NRL have obviously had some communication here saying, can you mind having the Golden Knights on a road trip? I think the NRL have had some discussions with the NHL about the Golden Knights being out of town, because the Vegas Golden Knights sell out their arena. They sell out T-Mobile every home game. They are a hot ticket. And yes, they are defending Stanley Cup champions, which helps. So with Vegas being on the road, the Golden Knights, I think that helps as well. I think there have been discussions held, because the fixture list for the NHL gets announced in the summer. And these games were announced while the NHL was in their off-season, before the fixture list was released. And the NRL have been going over to Vegas quite constantly behind the scenes for many months now. And Andrew Abdo and his corporate commercial aspect of things have been going over, having regular meetings with broadcasters, corporate sponsors, and the other major sports leagues. They've been having meetings with the NFL and NHL, because they have teams in Vegas, saying, look, we're going to come here on these dates. We don't want to clash with you guys. In order to use the stadium, the Raiders can't be in town. So they say, so it has to be post Super Bowl, and it has to be, obviously non-NFL season, because they need the playing surface. And the NHL, I think, outside of Raiders home games and the Super Bowl, they're the hot ticket in town, because they play 41 games a season, not including Stanley Cup playoffs, at T-Mobile, which is not that far from Allegiant, and they sell out. So the fact that the Vegas Golden Knights aren't playing in Vegas, that is more than just a coincidence. That would have been a lot of negotiations with rival sports for fan attention. Now, there's a lot of other things going on, which I'm going to discuss about other major leagues, because the state of Utah and Salt Lake City have now had the state of Utah is now guaranteed $1.8 billion for a Major League Baseball ballpark. That's about $900 million, and on either revamp or brand new indoor arena for the NBA and the NHL. So Salt Lake City is trying to get two more major leagues into the state of Utah with Major League Baseball and the NHL. And what's happening right now in Major League Baseball and the NHL is there are teams with arena issues and stadium issues. The Oakland A's and the Arizona Coyotes come to mind as two teams on the western side of North America that are struggling to figure out their long-term home, their long-term infrastructure side of things where fans go to games. Now, so that's an interesting subplot to what's also going on as well. I haven't even discussed the issue with Fanatics and the new Major Baseball kits that are an absolute disaster, which is a major talking point. But no, the only sports that they'll be competing with really at the moment would be the NBA and the NHL for viewership. Vegas aren't in town. The NBA doesn't have a footprint in Vegas, so local fans wouldn't be interested in the NBA for a certain aspect. The NFL season's done. It's beginning of March. It's that point in the season where we're not in playoffs yet. We have a rough idea of most teams that are going to be playoff teams. We have a rough idea of what teams aren't making the playoffs. So the timing at basically the first weekend in March, I think this is going to be a long-term thing on this 5-year plan where the NRL will choose the opening weekend in March to play the games. They are going to rotate the teams that go to Vegas. Obviously, the World Club Challenge comes into the conversation in regards to that also be played as part of the Vegas weekend, which then means you've got to get a team from the UK over, or potentially France if Catalan, do well. And then you've got to get a team in from Europe. Now, the cost overruns have been a big talking point this week. And again, that goes hand in hand with the visa issue that they had a couple of weeks ago and the promotional advertising campaign where they have just gone, sod the budget, we're throwing as much money as we can in order to make a profit back, that get as much interest as possible. When we're discussing the viewing figures, though, if and when they're released, will be interesting to have a look at how many Americans actually watch the games. But what I've seen on social media, and I'm not making this up, is more and more North American, because I've seen some Canadians as well, YouTubers making content surrounding the NHL and discussing the games in Vegas, the league, the sport of rugby league in general, and the NRL specifically, but also a little bit of Super League. Especially in the last year or so, but especially in the last couple of months, even before the Super Bowl and after the Super Bowl, it has ramped up. It has exploded, and more of their viewers who are American are also saying, "Hey, I've discovered this league, this sport. I've got into it." And part of that was to do with the resumption of play after COVID, where sports fans in North America were bored. US sport, North American sport was still not a thing. It was still suspended. There was no games taking place, and the AFL and the NRL were the two major sports leagues that North American sports fans discovered. When they heard that these leagues were resuming, NRL and then AFL, they went, let's just check this out. And that's where the NRL came up with this American idea. Was they looked at the viewership figures that first season of return, then the second season, and they didn't drop off as much as anticipated. They stayed there. And then they've been pretty consistent. Do I think? Do I think? Well, it's played at a semi-pro level on both east and west coast. There's a big Polynesian community in Hawaii and in the western half of the US, in states like Utah, like California, like Washington, Oregon. Because I've got a lot of viewers on the west. When I look at the breakdown of viewership in the US, because you can actually do that on YouTube Studio. It's one of the few countries where you can go by region, state by state basis and look at percentage of viewers. Hawaii, California comes up top, which by a long way, but Washington, Oregon, and Hawaii are in the top 5 or 10 states. They do really, really well. And then I correspond looking at the peaks and troughs and then rugby league and rugby union content, and it almost marries up. It's ridiculous. It is really, there's too much of a coincidence there. So when I've been doing my rugby league content and rugby union content since 2017, when I'm doing a match review, let's say a World Cup game or a Challenge Cup game, when I'm discussing things like Paul Kent, for example, when Paul Kent was announced as returning to NRL 360, there was a sudden spike in the state of Washington, and in California and in Oregon, there was a sudden spike in interest in the Western and the Western US, and it coincided with the announcement of Paul Kent returning to host NRL 360. Same was when he got arrested. Same when he had his trial. There were noticeable viewership spikes going up in the western side of the US. And then, also at the same time, in the state of Florida, guess what? Anytime I did any NRL content, so the shockingly bad season series, which I've got to resume, by the way, I think I've got up to like 2003 or 2004. Again, or the season preview, for example, Florida did quite well. And these are the locations in the US where rugby league is played. Rugby league is played on either coast. And there are teams, Florida and the Pacific coast, plus obviously they're taking, and Utah is where both codes of rugby are played, especially rugby league. And so I do think the potential is there. It's going to be interesting because Major League Rugby is an established professional league now with teams and expansion and a draft system, and they have agreements with the collegiate NCAA. So they're going to have to brand it very, very differently. Because when you say rugby to Americans, they don't distinguish between union and league. You have to explain it to them. Now, that's no disrespect to the US fan, but the way the media portrays it to them, and social media for a certain extent, the way the media says rugby, they don't distinguish between rugby union and rugby league. And so the average fan until 5-10 years ago would not distinguish, because the US were qualifying for both World Cups, so they didn't distinguish. And the average fan would just see the score, go, okay, the USA has won or lost a game today in a World Cup. No, it's not the FIFA World Cup, but they would see it and move on. Yeah, we've got a new laptop. The old one died. It's a nice way to describe what happened to my HP laptop. It died. It's still alive, but it meant live streams became impossible. It meant that video uploads could sometimes take up to 5 to 6 hours for a 5-minute video to upload. The components died. It got old. Windows 10, some of the updates stopped working. I had to this time last year I had to completely reinstall Windows 10, a later patch of Windows 10. So it actually was dying last year. It survived a year longer than some of the components were meant to. So the hard drive, the motherboard, the processor, the graphics card, the RAM sticks, they should all have expired a year ago. I've managed to coax it for an extra 12 months. It was on life support. I still have it. I've just got to uninstall the antivirus and cancel my antivirus subscription to Avast. which, by the way, is not worth the money that for the basic package. Don't get it, because it will try and basically conflict with the Windows Phone. It was a nightmare. Software was a nightmare. The hardware was a nightmare. It basically died. And so, yeah, it's new laptop, which is a Chromebook Plus. It's a Chromebook 8 Plus, I think, or a Chromebook Plus. I can't remember. It's got a full HD webcam. It's smaller, but because it's smaller, the actual webcam is wider, so you actually get to see more of the mess that I live in. The colours are different. I've noticed the colour tones. It's brighter, but not as intense with colours, which is interesting. So I might adjust my lighting setup a little bit. I'll experiment with that, not on live stream, but my side light, I could get away with having it bright on the old one, but not as bright on this. So I've got to do a bit of experimentation with lighting. Very close to the bottom of the championship. As a Blackburn fan, the month before Christmas, December, January, and February, right off. We had a good little cup run, but disaster in the league. One manager up, one manager in. We're not doing well. We're on the edge of the playoff places at the end of November. We're now lower mid-table, not playing well. Although since John Eustace, we're now playing well and playing with an energy and commitment that I haven't seen from the team in a long time. And the conversation's changing about what's the final third of the season going to look like for us. Rotherham, too good for League One, not good enough for the Championship. Same with Peterborough United, for example, one of those teams that just can't get going in the Championship, but generally are too good for League One. But yeah, the relegation battles, apart from the Premier League, are pretty much, interesting, because Reading's situation, although the Premier League could get interesting with Everton and Nottingham Forest, and what could potentially happen to Chelsea and Man City, depending on if the Premier League can pull their finger out and actually do their job properly, because Everton have had 4 points reduced from their penalty, which has completely changed the bottom half of the table yet again. They're one of the few clubs I've got to do a club history on as well. I've realised that they're one of the, I think, 2 or 3 clubs currently in the top 4 divisions of English football I've yet to do a club history on. So that's on the to-do list and has been on the to-do list for 2 years. But no, joking aside, AFC Rochdale could go out of business. Torquay United on the verge of administration. Reading are just, I don't think, I fear for Reading. But no, the situation with club ownership is worrying at this time. Very concerned. It's not just where they are in league tables. Financially, clubs are in a mess. It doesn't matter what league you're in. Clubs are. We have to start asking questions of the governing bodies. That's the FA, Premier League, and Football League, and even the non-league structure as well. We start have to ask serious questions now about the transparency, ownership parameters, and a whole host of issues. Generally speaking, this is a mess, which I think there's been really weak governance, not just in English football, British football, so I'm including Scotland in this, but at a international governance level, like you away from FIFA. This has been brewing for years, and we were always told the TV deals would support, support lower levels of the game and make the game self-sufficient and blah 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 blah. So basically, my entire lifetime, we were told these new TV deals, it's going to protect the game, make clubs self-sufficient, blah 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 blah, because that's money. They're saying money, money. Just distract with. And then when bad things happen and things don't work out as intended, so like the Super League debacle with the refereeing standards, and then we have, announcements made, like the Major League Baseball jersey fiasco between Nike Fanatics and Major League Baseball. and they're saying, "Oh, we're these new breathable." They use long words, distract, smoke and mirrors, when in reality, it's all about making profits for very, very few, and the end consumer, the fan, getting mugged off. Because we were told these TV deals would mean ticket prices would stay low, merchandise prices would stay low, and the game would be self-sustaining itself. Well, ticket prices are through the roof, merchandise prices are through the roof, clubs are going bust, player wages are out of control, player bonuses are out of control, agents' fees are out of control, transfer fees are ridiculous, contracts are ridiculous. But we were told that all these TV deals, broadcasting every game, would be good. It's good. We have to make sure certain games are broadcast protected. So to protect attendance, important. Then why are we seeing empty seats all over the place? Why are we seeing ticket prices being ridiculously high, considering that we've got £1 billion or $1 billion, depending on what current, or €1 billion, whatever TV deal we're talking about. We've got these multi-million dollar, multi-million pound, multi-million euro, TV deal put in place for this league or that league. Yeah, we've got clubs going out of business. We've got TV deals being worth peanuts. So the Super League TV deal is more games, so every game, less money, and 3 teams do not get free-to-air games at all. That's London Broncos, Huddersfield Giants, and Hull FC will not be shown on TV unless they're in the Challenge Cup, or one of those teams that has, broadcast games is in the Challenge Cup after those 3 have been knocked out. So if the Broncos and Giants, let's say, make the Challenge Cup final, yes, they will get broadcast on free-to-air TV. They might, or even if they make the quarterfinals or semi-finals of the Challenge Cup, they will get a free-to-air broadcast. Otherwise, they're not guaranteed to get one. That is a joke. When you've got all these live games on free-to-air, you've got more live games on free-to-air than there are clubs. It shows the favouritism certain clubs get. So we're talking St Helens, we're talking Wigan, we're talking Warrington, and we're talking Leeds. Get 2 games each. Now, yes, and how many teams can sell out unless they're doing well? It's too much money for the average man. Yeah, if you watch my Wolves Brighton match review video that I did a couple of days ago, I make reference to the empty seats. My Blackburn Newcastle review, I make reference to the empty seats. That was a brilliant game, by the way. Both sides really went for it. Fantastic game. Wolves Brighton, it was like none. It was we could have been watching, Kettering versus, Worksop Town would have been better quality. I know I'm probably not playing in the Kettering. Who would be in Kettering's division? Well, Nuneaton Borough gone out of business. Oh, Kettering. Who would be in Kettering's division in the non-league? I've got to make sure I get a team that's in their division. But we could have been like, Scarborough versus Halifax or something in the non-league. That was the quality we were watching when Wolves play Brighton. It's a terrible game, shocking game. Well, the non-league, that you could have like a non-league club who do reasonably well with attendance in empty seats at Molineux the other night or at Ewood the other night, plus some. Very noticeable. I mean, the Coventry Maidstone game. I mean, Maidstone really travelled well. Coventry fans just didn't bother turning up. And they missed a very good Coventry performance. Coventry put 5 past their opposition, and Coventry aren't playing well in the league right now. They're really misfiring, but maybe that had something to do with it. Maybe because it was a Monday night game. Maybe the weather wasn't great. I don't know. But what was the attendance? I don't know. I know the attendance at Ewood was around 27,000. Yet, that's 8,000 tickets not used. Because Ewood Park's, I think, 36,000 attendance if capacity. There is an attendance issue with Coventry. I think the team are just floating around mid-table. Obviously, Narry missed out on promotion last year, but they're floating mid-table. there's been attendance issues at Coventry for a while. The team has had an up and down yo-yo existence since being relegated from the Premier League, since they've been in that stadium. There's a disconnect between ownership and the club and the players and the fans. And it's one of those clubs where there are off-field issues that I think contribute to attendance. Although FA Cup games always have limited attendance, it shows cup games are no longer attraction. I wouldn't say all FA Cup games have had poor attendances, but it's very, very noticeable. The midweek games, especially, aren't the draw that they used to be. I think the midweek game, the games this week, spread out over several days, and the kickoff times being staggered between 7:30 and 8 o'clock, when there's no replay. So if you draw after 90 minutes, you go to extra time and penalties, or extra time and or penalties, like the Blackburn Newcastle game. I mean, that finished very late, and you've got fans still leaving the ground and leaving the Ewood Park area at 11 o'clock, 11:30, to either go back to various parts of Lancashire, because Blackburn draws in fans from all over South and East Lancashire, and going back to the northeast, and some Newcastle fans live all over the place. But these are two well-supported clubs. But the away fans have got to get back to Newcastle. That's a several-hour drive, and in bad weather conditions, which is a factor this time of year. Late night, getting back to Tyne and Wear that's yeah. Cardiff set out in the Prem, but usually average. Although you have a cup, it depends on. I mean, Cardiff. It depends also on away allocations and ticket price and how they promote it. How a team is doing, you'll have fair weather fans at a lot of clubs. Not every team, but some teams it's more fair weather fandom. I can't speak, obviously, for Cardiff. I can't comment on the Bluebirds' attendance figures, but there is a disconnect between the fans and the owners. I think that's a big issue. Is ownership. So I think it is more off-field stuff than on-field stuff. I mean, if they were doing really well in the Championship, that might have a bearing on their attendance. But I do believe I know there's a disconnect between the fans and the owners. There's a bad relationship there. There has been for many, many years between the ownership and the fans. It's a well-known fact. They should structure the FA Cup with all clubs in the first round, but more games. Again, that's a debate between the various domestic FAs around Europe and UEFA. Many League Cups have disappeared in the last 10 to 15 years. And that is a debate between the domestic FAs and UEFA's hierarchy, and the clubs in Europe, all the various leagues around Europe and their FAs, and then taking pressure with their leagues and FAs to the higher levels of governance within the game. Depending on the club, which had around 25,000, I believe, when we played Maidstone. Yeah, that I think was a sellout at Portman Road, if I believe correctly. But you didn't play well. You deserved to lose that game, but the attendance was really good. But again, Maidstone did take a lot of travelling support from Kent, which is not a far away day. You're only obviously Kent, Suffolk, you've got Essex in between, a bit of London, but Maidstone, Coventry, they travel. Maidstone travelled well in this year's FA Cup, and they had a great cup run, and they beat lots of league opposition, and they made a lot of headlines, and it was a great story, and etc. etc. But they were given a bigger allocation when it was known that they were getting drawn throughout from the first round until they got knocked out in the fifth round. I believe the FA dictates how much home and away allocation clubs get, and Portman Road being Premier League quality stadium, Championship quality stadium. I think international's been played at Portman Road, if I remember correctly. So the FA gives out allocation of tickets, and then there'll be the potential for expanded allocation. Maidstone travelled well. It was great to see a good crowd, home crowd as well, at Portman Road. But no, I mean, look, Ewood Park not sold out, Molineux not sold out. I'm just going by, a Championship club and a Premier League club, and noticeable. And they tried to at Ewood Park. They tried to avoid looking at the Blackburn end and the upper tier. They placed the cameras very strategically. The Wolves game, yeah, where the away allocation was, you couldn't hide that massive section in the Brighton allocation that wasn't taken up. And that's no disrespect to the Brighton fans that went all the way to the Midlands to watch their team play like utter garbage to then lose to go down to the South Coast. No disrespect to Brighton. They do have a very hardcore support. They've got a great fan base. But it was noticeable that because of the time of the week, the kickoff time, midweek game, late kickoff, yeah, you're not going to sell every ticket for that. Really poor weather this week. The weather's been dreadful. You're not going to sell every ticket. Do I think the League Cup will go? It's Carabao, by the way, is the current sponsor. I think since the Cup Winners' Cup has been scrapped by UEFA 25 years ago. 25 years ago, the Cup Winners' Cup disappeared from European competition. Wow, I used to love watching that as a kid. It was a great Thursday nights, Cup Winners' Cup. Get and watch. That was brilliant European competition. Great history. They basically merged that into the UEFA Cup, which is now the Europa League, and now they brought in the Conference League, which basically replaces the Cup Winners' Cup with a crap name. But since that decision was taken in the late 90s, in 97 they were phasing it out. They said, look, we're going to move away from this cup competition. We're going to have group stages in the Champions League, and then eventually the UEFA Cup, Europa League gets group stages as well. It got pushed down the pecking order. They get rid of it. It devalues the cup competitions. It took a few years for the cup competitions to be weakened. But we've seen, I think the French have got rid of their League Cup. I think the Germans have got rid of theirs. It's not great. Will a team outside the Premiership win the FA Cup again? Yeah, we could, maybe this season. The potential's there. Coventry in the next round. I think there's... Are Coventry the only non-Premier League team left? I believe they are. It's potential. Unlikely, but last year we had an all-champion... I think we had 2 all-championship quarterfinals last season. We had championship sides in the semis, so the potential is there. It is there. We've had a couple of championship clubs in the Premier League era make the final. Obviously, Cardiff and Millwall, when they were in the final in the last 20 years. The potential's there. Very unlikely, though. You look at the percentage, it's really low. I think many teams can prepare for next season in the EFL. Many teams have little to play for. There's definitely 2 teams in the Premier League that are done. I can't see Burnley or Sheffield United making the great escape. I can see Luton potentially still fighting till the last game of the season. We don't know what's going to happen with Nottingham Forest and Everton yet in regards to further points deductions for Everton and Nottingham Forest and what get slapped or they get hit with. Although Luton's form the last couple of weeks has slowed a little bit. Had a poor run of form the last few weeks, but they're still scrapping and fighting for every point. Whereas Sheffield United and Burnley look done. Group stages for all 3. Yeah, I mean, look, there's too many European games now because money. Money. Instead of not every game counts because you'll have so many dead rubbers in the group stages. It's unreal. And now they're changing the format for the Champions League again from next season, which is just European Super League light. That was designed to get the big clubs who wanted the European Super League on board to placate them. It's going to be I don't know how long that format lasts, but there's a point where fans, we've had enough. And I think we are starting to see, in regards to the cost of going, and I do mean this, in regards to the cost of going to watch professional sport, I haven't been to a well, ice hockey was the sport that was the most affordable for me. I haven't been to an ice hockey match for 4 years since the end of the 2018-2019 season. I think I went to a couple of preseason games in 2019-2020 season before I actually moved to my old apartment. I went to a couple of preseason matches and cup matches in 2019. I haven't been for 4.5 years to an ice hockey match. Wow, yeah, I thought that flown by the last 4 years. I haven't been to a rugby or cricket or football for a lot longer than that. So yeah, I haven't been to a sports venue for a long time. How much for it depends. If you're talking elite league, you're looking at about £15 to £20, maybe £25. If you're looking at national league, you're looking at £10 to £15. So it's not breaking the bank levels of ticket price. But then you've got to factor in food and drink and transportation. That's what doesn't get factored in. So if you factor all that in, then yeah, there's a bit of cost involved. I could have gone to a Bees game this weekend, but it's the transport cost. It's not the game night experience actually paying for the ticket. It's everything else adds up with how prices have been rising with inflation the last year and a half. It's just not financially viable at the moment. What value for money? I don't think so. No. I can't comment on ticket prices because I haven't been to a game in so long. But yeah, no, it hasn't been value for money for a long time. I don't think that's the feeling I'm getting off social media. That's the feeling I'm getting watching as many FA Cup games as I do. That's the feeling I get with that. Obviously, we've got the Euros this summer. We've got to see what Germany as the host nation dish up with attendance. But yeah, I think we've reached a point now where the average fan just doesn't have the disposable income anymore to go to as many games as they did and buy the merchandise that they did all those years ago. I look at the Newcastle Blackburn game. I saw a lot of Newquay Brown and McEwen's Lager sponsored jerseys in the crowd the other night. And obviously McEwen's Lager was the early to mid 90s with Blackburn, and Newquay Brown was the 90s and early 2000s with Newcastle United. So we're talking jerseys, football shirts that are 20, 25 plus years old. It's nearly 30 years old with the McEwen's Lager sponsorship with Blackburn. We're talking nearly 20 to 30-year-old shirts, jerseys, depending on where you are in the world and what you would call, your replica, match day replica kits. We are talking 20 to 30-year-old. Newquay Brown has not sponsored Newcastle since Alan Shearer was there, and McEwen's Lager hasn't sponsored Blackburn since Alan Shearer was there. So we are going back a generation of fandom. Some of those would have been hand-me-downs from father to son. Some of those would have been bought online by collectors or fans who wanted to get a retro kit. And they would have spent, and that tells you something. They're not buying the latest merch. They're not buying the latest jerseys, the latest kits. Football is just getting very expensive. We'll call it soccer because there may be some North Americans and Australians watching this, because there has been a massive growth in the channel from Australia and the US, especially Australia, but the US lately. So when we say football, they're like, "What are we talking about? We're talking about rugby league or American football?" No, we're talking about Premier League, Champions League. But yeah, football's just getting expensive, and in that, with my team, there's the story of my car getting nicked. Don't recommend parking your car in Birmingham. I don't recommend going to Birmingham in general. I've worked there. I should know. I don't recommend going to Birmingham. My dad used to live near Birmingham. I used to get the train there a lot. I don't recommend visiting the West Midlands. I've got family from the West Midlands. I should be saying this. I've got relatives in oh god, I've got extended family in Dudley. Yeah, um, what people don't realise, and I have sympathy for your car getting pinched, but West Midlands police aren't the best police force in the country, and the crime rate in parts of the West Midlands is extortionately high. People, I say this, and I'll actually follow a couple of American YouTubers who discuss, places around the world and top tens, and places to move to and to visit, places to avoid. Yeah, Birmingham, right? Birmingham comes in at second. Is it second or third for the most dangerous city in the UK? I think it's third for the most dangerous city in Europe, and I think it's second or third for the most dangerous city. So, depending on the crime stats you look at and what they're classing as, Preston's quite bad as well. Bradford is shocking. Birmingham is quite high up when it comes to, well, I think it's 25% of the population of Birmingham alone. That's not including the whole West Midlands, but Birmingham alone is classed as low income or living in poverty. And we're talking deprived. We're talking poverty. We're talking underemployed or unemployed. 1 in 4 people in Birmingham is on a low income or on welfare. That is a shocking number of people. Shocking number. Yet by US standards, Birmingham is classed as an average city. Talking about safety wise, Birmingham is above the US average for safety. So let that sink in. I've worked in Birmingham. My dad lived near Birmingham. I've gone to Birmingham a lot over many, many years. Would not recommend. Would not recommend. Just don't. It's a city with a lot of issues, a lot of social problems. I know I'm joking about it. There's some great people from the West Midlands. I've never had an issue with people from the West Midlands. I've always had really good banter with people from the West Midlands. I've never had an issue with that part of the world myself. But when you go there, you do. I nearly went to university there when I was 16. I was doing my A levels. I was discussing moving in with me dad and going to university in Birmingham. I nearly moved to Birmingham. And if I didn't go to university, I was discussing getting work with my dad after finishing school and college. I was discussing moving up to the West Midlands as in my late teens. Let that sink in. I nearly became an honorary Brummie. Shocking. But this is nearly 20 years ago. I'm now 34. This is when I was 16, 17. So this is 17 years ago. Yeah, seems like yesterday. But anyway, moving on. So I nearly moved to the West Midlands. Technically, it would have been Worcestershire, but I nearly moved up there. And long story short, obviously it didn't pan out that way. And unfortunately, my dad shortly thereafter did unfortunately sadly passed away. But at the time, when I used to go visit my dad, from being a very young kid to teenager, when he was living up there, the deprivation, it was striking. It was very, very striking. You're in the big city, the big smoke, and he lived just outside in rural Worcestershire, but within a couple of miles, you were at Birmingham city limits. And there was a big sign saying, "Welcome to Birmingham city limits. Here you are. Welcome to the West Midlands." And you would leave Worcestershire, and you would go into and very, very quickly, within about 500 meters, you're in a council estate, and you're in or suburbia, and then very, very quickly you're into a rundown council estate in a very rough area, and then suddenly you're in Birmingham, and it was an experience. And as you got older, you understand what it's not just graffiti; these are gang signs. You understand what deprivation is, unemployment. And then after my dad passed away, I did a contract job in Birmingham, and it had got worse. And it was only 4.5 years apart, and it wasn't a pleasant experience up in the West Midlands. But I personally have had no problems with people from the West Midlands at all. But it was an eye opener to go. I thought where I lived had problems, and then you get up there and you're like, shit, this is serious. You know, the underemployment of youth and the unemployment of youth and the deprivation, and it really was like, Christ, this is. Forget the funny accent, forget the Brummie accent and the Black Country, the Birmingham Dudley Wolves. Forget that, and they're taking the Mickey because I've got friends and family with that accent, so I can take the piss tongue in cheek, and we take the Mickey out of the Walsall accent and the Brummie accent and the Dudley accent and all that. Some of our greatest football players have come from the West Midlands. Some of our greatest musicians, like Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Black Sabbath, have come from the West Midlands, and I'm related to the drummer from Slade. But the deprivation is stunning. It's depressing, actually. This is the heartbed of the Industrial Revolution. Locomotive engineering, car engineering. The steel works, the jewelry quarter, the British jewelry industry. It is stunning that you have some of the biggest multinational companies have at some point been in Birmingham and the surrounding area. And then you have such depressing deprivation. And I have a lot of sympathy for people who live in Birmingham. The gang crime is through the roof because young people either don't have jobs or they have limited opportunities economically. And when it didn't bring me to tears, but it had an impact on me. And that's a decade ago. And it really hits you hard. Because my dad spent a lot of the last decade and a half of his life living just outside Birmingham, and I did spend a lot of time going up there as a kid. It does hit you hard. It really does. Oh, the worry of your car getting nicked. Right, so your car hasn't been stolen, but I know people have had the engine, the whole engine taken out. You need to jack that up and get an engine crate. How within an hour and 20 minutes of you getting your ticket, getting in the stand, watching the game, getting up, the car's there, the bit that drives the car, the propulsion bit of the car is gone. That is ridiculous. That is ridiculous. That you can go to Villa Park, St Andrews, the Hawthorns, you park your car, you go into the game, you come out of the game. Oh, so my 1.6 litre petrol's missing from my insert car brand here, or my 1.9 litre diesel's gone. I had a car, or it's up on bricks. Like, where's my wheels gone? I parked my car here, and bits of my car are missing, but the car shell, the body, the main component's gone. That's the engine gear. That is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. You go to a game and you come out and everything else is there, but they would need an engine crane. They would have to that. So basically, someone with a mechanical qualifications after your engine out your car. That's ridiculous. Ridiculous. I know, nicking bits of cars is a thing, like, catalytic converters, exhaust systems, and maybe like component like wheels, but to take the whole engine in a short space of time, that is fucking ridiculous. Well, it's classed as the second city for a reason. It's a big city. It's a big urban area. The West Midlands, the whole of West Midlands is a big urban area. But no, the deprivation and the unemployed. It's an eye opener. Outside the city centre, Birmingham looks like Jaywick, but without the Jesus Christ. Oh my God. The city centre ain't much to talk about. Birmingham is not pleasant. The Bullring is horrible. But no, the West Midlands has been, apparently Solihull and Smethwick is apparently like paradise of the West Midlands. I have sympathy for people who live in the West Midlands if they've got to put up with that level of crime and deprivation and underemployment, not unemployment, underemployment and low wages and poor living standards. I feel sympathy for the young people having no opportunities. I feel sympathy for working people there who are just getting by. Um, that is it. 1 in 4 people are either on benefits or income support, so they're working but they're receiving in work benefits, or they're on a low income household. And you look at the crime levels and school absences and food bank usage. I know it's a sports, but yeah, it tells you a lot about the importance of sport to the community. But then you look at what's going on with the 3 main clubs in Castle Bromwich is technically Warwickshire, isn't it? But let's be honest, the clubs in and around the West Midlands, and you know, Aston Villa and Wolves are really flying the flag high. West Brom have got off-field issues financially. Birmingham are a mess off the field as well. Walsall can't break into the Championship and eventually the Premier League. They're stuck at their level. There isn't the money in Walsall to invest. Coventry, just outside Birmingham, they've got their issues, and then there's a lot of deprivation in Coventry as well. The West Midlands has a lot of socio-economic issues, and it's stunning, the situation. Yes, Luke Littler, the young darts player, he's from Warrington. He's doing fantastically well as a 16-year-old, and good luck to him. Hopefully, he has a great career as a darts player. Yeah, it is amazing how close the Hawthorn, St Andrews, and Villa Park are, and even Molineux and what's Walsall's home ground, because that's right by the M6. They're all within a very small radius of each other. It's like Greater London with all the football clubs there, with Brentford, Fulham, Chelsea, and QPR all within a similar radius in West London. No, it's not nice driving around the West Midlands. It's not particularly pleasant. No, I've done it a fair bit. I've done it with work and leisure as well. It's not particularly pleasant. Yeah, I've heard about what's going to be happening with the massive hike in Birmingham City Council having one of the biggest local authority bankruptcies in history. Although they're not officially bankrupt, but they're bankrupt in all but name. It's not much better here down in the southeast. I can tell you that. Slough and Woking are in the same position. They're neighbouring councils to where I am in the area where I live, outside southwest London. It's the best. That's Walsall, yes. Why Birmingham so bad? The city name is worse than a lot. We also lost 4-3 to Southampton today, for fuck's sake. Southampton are a good side, though. Good side. We have a blue. Oh God, yeah, but we have a blue and white as well with me. Yeah, there's a lot of blue in the chat. So basically, everyone's football club wears blue at some point in their kit. So Jesus Christ, and we're all doing shit. we're all having disgraceful seasons. But no, all joking aside about the performances of our particular clubs, what is striking is the disconnect between the fans and their club's ownership. I mean, Blackburn don't like the Venkies, Birmingham with their ownership issues going back many years, Cardiff with is it Tang, the Vincent Tang, and the relationship he has with the Cardiff fan base. It's kind of striking as I'm seeing, and Everton with their disastrous ownership and what's going on there. It's kind of there's a trend I'm seeing. Yeah, Vincent Tan. He's a. How high does he wear his? He's the Simon Cowler foot. He's the Chinese Simon Cowler football ownership. His trousers are up on his tits, up his armpits. No, but jokes aside, I think there are some clubs with worse ownership than ours. And it's not just as I say, not just an English problem. You look at Europe, you look across Europe, and there are clubs in dire difficulty. It just doesn't get reported. He's lost interest since he can't play around with the team's colours and badge. It's the same with the Hull ownership as well. They wanted to change the name and the crest, and fans told him to jog on. But yeah, I mean, I look at it, and you look at the governing body, you look at the FA, and then you look at Premier League and Football League, and you've got this director's test, fit and proper persons test, whatever you want to name it. And it's a joke because people are getting stakes, ownership stakes, or full ownership, or being part of an ownership group of clubs who should not be there, and should never be involved with professional sport. You look at the Reading situation. Have you seen Bournemouth's new badge? Jesus Christ, it looks so generic. Bournemouth have changed their logo. What what I call the Weller shampoo logo, because obviously Weller being Pantene Pro V. Well, I think it was Weller, was a hair shampoo brand which looks very similar to the Bournemouth logo. But it's like Leeds United when they tried to redesign their logo, and that was like, what have they done? Shambolic. It really is. Let me have a look at Bournemouth. I'm going to have to look this up because the Bournemouth logo for me looks like the Weller shampoo logo from back in the day. Right, let's check this. I want to see this. I need to see this. I do. So AFC Bournemouth. I can never spell Bournemouth for some reason. New AFC Bournemouth new logo proposed. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, my God. Oh, dear. They've always had, for the majority of their existence, not all their, because here's the logos. I'm going to be a bit careful. Here's all their historical logos, right? The present day one is there. You notice they've always had, apart from 81 to 83. So that logo there is the one it's a retro. They're going back to the 81-83 logo. But apart from that, from 72 to 81 and from 83 till now, they've had the guy with long hair heading the ball. So what I call the Weller logo, as I call it. But between 81 and 83, they had the cherries, and it looks like something Jeremy Clarkson would do in a car park with spinning up, doing a burnout. It looks like a Jeremy Clarkson. But basically, no, I don't understand it, because the logo historically has always had a player heading the football, apart from three of them. The initial one, when they were called Boscombe, then they had Boscombe or Bournemouth Football Club or Boscombe Football Club before they became AFC Bournemouth in 74. So they were known as Boscombe Football Club until 1974. Then they become AFC Bournemouth. And for 2 seasons, they had the cherries, the plums, the testes. Didn't last very long, and they rebranded in 1983, and they've stuck with pretty much the same crest for 41 years. And it's part of their identity as the guy heading the ball. That is it. So it's almost as bad. It's not quite as bad as Leeds United's rebrand that very quickly was dropped. I'm surprised fans are happy with this rebranding, because they clearly weren't happy in 81 to 83, because very, very quickly it was noticed by ownership. That's a pair of testicles. Your cherry. It wasn't a successful logo back in the early 80s, because the season after they rebranded back to what they have now, they beat Man United in the FA Cup very historically with Harry Redknapp as manager, and went on a great cup run and had a really great. They became part of the national consciousness, and they made a lot of money out of that. How do fans feel about this? Seriously, how do the fans feel? Were they consulted in the same way that Leeds United fans were consulted about their shocking potential logo redesign? I don't think they were, to be honest. That is shocking. That is dreadful. How the logo now you can actually sell to the US market, to the US viewership, to the overseas fans. You can sell that because it looks, that is terrible. That is. I know there's a trend with clubs like your Man Cities, your Chelsea's going to a more retro 70s look with their crests in last decade or so. And retro is a thing, but that is the worst retro logo I've ever seen. There's a reason why they only kept it for 2 seasons. Why bring it back? It is horrendous. They tried, they failed. It's shocking. No, I can't see how the fans. I can't see how the fans would be happy with that. And I can't see how they're going to get away with branding that and the fans buying the merchandise. And talking about merchandise, I haven't even really discussed what's happening with Major League Baseball and the Nike and Fanatics disaster with their issues with quality control in regards to fan and player kits being a disaster. I hope it doesn't. Well, I mean, has it been confirmed that they're changing their crest permanently, or is this just a rendering to say, look, we want to have this pending feedback? I don't think it lasts very long. I think fans will say, get rid very quickly, get rid. But this is an issue we're going to have with a lot of clubs saying we need to, no, it's a flat no from me, and I'm not a Bournemouth fan. I want to see Bournemouth do well as a club and progress in the league and do well and such. But it's a no from me. As a sport, it's just a no, just a general no. Shocking. It makes Leeds United that one, which was shocking in itself. It's equally bad for different reasons because away fans and even the home fans are going to take the piss out of it. And I think ownership and their marketing department have really made a blunder there. It's not necessarily the 2 cherries, it's just the goddamn circle. Why copy City and Chelsea? City and Chelsea aren't the only clubs to do that. It seems to be an ongoing trend now with football clubs to do that. It's I don't know. What I do know is a lot of fans have a disconnect with when ownership decide to make decisions like this to rebrand clubs and rebrand the club logos. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. Subtle tweaks, yes. Completely rebranding and then having a rebrand disaster like Leeds, like Bournemouth. I'm not even sold on the Chelsea or the Man City rebrandings of their logo, their crest from what was before. Though with Man City, they did have that logo in the past. They did have that crest in the past. And there is this trend but that Puma third alternate away kit that they had a couple of seasons ago, all the Puma kits, that was a PR nightmare for Puma as the manufacturer. And what we're seeing now is prices for, match day replicas and authentic replicas and the fan experience when it comes to buying merchandise. Prices going up. Manufacturing, they've gone to the lowest and the cheapest manufacturing materials. Look at Castore with the Aston Villa and Newcastle and some other clubs that use Castore with the wardrobe malfunctions, especially for the women's teams. But the best football, I'm a Blackburn fan. Blackburn, of course. The best one. Shit. Newcastle and Sunderland, they're very similar, but with their colour, the team colours. Preston with the sheep and the cross is unique. Bristol Rovers is unique with the pirate, or the the swashbuckling privateer. I think Leeds and Blackburn, with Leeds having the white rose of Yorkshire, Blackburn having the red rose of Lancashire, that has historical connotations going back 500, 600, 700 years. So I think that's more regional, historical kind of political in a sense. But I like Bristol Rovers with the privateer, the pirate. I like Sheffield United with, again, you've got the Yorkshire White Rose with the two scimitars. That's an iconic. I don't like how Sheffield Wednesday have changed the Sheffield Wednesday owl. I don't like that. I like the old logo, if I'm being honest. Fulham have always had FFC. It's always been their thing, having the coloured letters. Brentford, they have the circle with the B in it. Reading have always had the coat of arms in a circle like a shield. Brighton and Hove, just the seagull. I think it's simple, but it's BHA. They have BHA above, so Brighton and Hove or Brighton in the circle. It was just once the seagull. Some are simple and quite good. I like Southampton. It's unique a little bit with the Dell, which is the tree above the coat of arms. But Preston North End is unique with the line down, the relaxing sheep with the cross. That one is quite unique because that religious connotation with the cross there, and then you have Bristol. I think Bristol Rovers have the best one because it's the pirate, the Captain Morgan. I think it is actually meant to be Captain Morgan, who was actually a privateer from Bristol. Standing like that, I actually think Bristol Rovers with the Captain Morgan privateer. When people say Captain Morgan, you mean the rum? It's like, well, a lot of pirates, privateers, were based out of Bristol or Plymouth. So Plymouth Argyle with the Mayflower on their logo, their crest is, again, you have some of these historical. So Luton with the hat, you got Yeovil, you got Barnsley, the Tykes with the the working class, workmen. It's all like the ones that are based in a coat of arms, a crest. Yeah, Birmingham City. That's quite a good one, I will admit. It's similar to Real. Is it Real Betis have a similar with the football on it? I believe. There are some great ones in European football as well with logos and Roma's SPQR and the Rome, the wolf, the lupus, the wolf, and Romulus and Remus. You can't beat Roma's AS Roma's crest at all. That historical link with the community and what the city of Rome and the Republic and then the Empire and the SPQR and the foundation, the city foundation. I mean, that goes back like 2,000-3,000 years. I mean, that's an iconic symbol of the city. You have the Bayern Munich one is basically the Bavarian state flag with Bayern Munich. Hertha Berlin's one, that's quite a good one. Union Berlin's another one. There are some good ones. And then there's some pretty generic, very corporate looking ones that it's a corporate rebrand. And then there's some disasters like Leeds United's proposed rebrand that was very quickly shelved when people said, no, what are you doing? Go away. Ajax, Sparta Rotterdam have a good one as well. PSV and Eindhoven have a good one. There are some good ones. I mean, Anderlecht is one that sticks out for me. The Anderlecht crest. Bugger. A lot of the Spanish ones have very good club logos. Real Betis, Real Sociedad. Oh Christ! There's is it RCD Mallorca? A good one. Celta Vigo is an iconic one. Deportivo La Coruña is another one. There are some iconic ones in I think Espanyol have quite a good one as well. There's some iconic ones in Spain and Portugal with Benfica and Sporting and Porto and Belenenses and Boavista and some of the clubs in Portugal. And then I think is it Rapid Vienna? Rapid Vienna. They have a good crest. And then you get the CSKAs and the various clubs in Eastern Europe like Red Star and SK. Zenit St. Petersburg had a pretty good crest. Dynamo Kiev had a good one back in the day. And then some of the Panathinaikos and Olympiakos have some good crests. PSG's shit. Oh look, the Eiffel Tower and PSG. No, Olympiakos and Panathinaikos. You've got Panathinaikos have is it the Celtic is it Clover and Olympiakos, or is it the other way around? Is it Olympiakos have the Clover and Panathinaikos have the Greco-Roman head? Atalanta have a great one. Atalanta's Ladea, the Diana, the huntress. That's I think the best Italian one is Atalanta's. Yeah, I don't like the Juventus rebrand. That looks very corporate. Not as great as the old Juve. Well, the best looking sports logo, and that isn't Association Football. Christ, Jesus. Wow, there's been a lot. There has been a lot. Trying to think. The defunct team, the Hamburg Freezers in the German Hockey League, they had the frozen hockey mask. That one was a good one with the frozen ice tier. Hamburg Freezers, they had basically an old 1970s, early 80s style goalie mask, and it had a lot of ice, so like ice blue and white, and it had a frozen tier. Basically, it was like an insane cereal. That was quite a good one. I like a lot of the NRL logos. I have to admit, I do like. I think the Dolphins have gone with a simple, the regular gone with the dolphin. Obviously, if you look at my background to my phone, I've got the Canberra Raiders. They've had gone through a couple of rebrandings and tweaking the Viking head. You have. There's quite a few. There's quite a few ice hockey. Jokerit, for example, with the Harlequin jester head. Jokerit in Helsinki. That's a fantastic. That's you got. What's the Swedish one with the American War Chief? God. There's you. No, you've got Jokerit and the Swedish champions, and it's the most successful Swedish ice hockey team, and they have the American War Chief, Native American War Chief logo, and it's what the Blackhawks should have, but they don't have, and that one's quite well known. You have the various Canuck logos that they've had over the years, from the sticking rink to the flying the spaghetti skates, the various Orca ones, and Johnny Canuck, where you've got the lumberjack skating lumberjack. I think for me the best LA Kings logo was the one that just not the original Crown, but the early 2000s Crown logo on the purple background was their best logo. Shit, there's quite a few actually. There's quite a few. I don't like any of the original 6 logos apart from I think the Blackhawks is possibly the most iconic, but I don't like any of the original 6 NHL logos. I'm just being brutally honest. I really don't. The Six Nations. Yeah, I think it's the one after a World Cup. So the World Cup's just happened. I think it was the same in early 2020 after the 2019 World Cup. You have that kind of the World Cup's just been a bit of fatigue, a bit of a hangover from the World Cup in a sense. Ireland are going to get the Grand Slam. No doubt on that. Whether they do it with 5 bonus point wins as well, which I don't think has been done in Six Nations history since the bonus point system has been brought in the last 6-7 years. We'll see. And I think Wales get the wooden spoon. I think Italy beat Wales. I think Italy beat Scotland. I think Wales get the wooden spoon. Frölunda, that's the one. Frölunda, they're the one with the Native American war chief. That's just insane. That puts the former Washington, well now the Washington Commanders and the Chicago Blackhawks to shut. That is stunning. The colours on that and the artistry on that, absolutely stunning. It's iconic. Ice hockey fandom would know the Frölunda logo. If you're not an ice hockey fan, you wouldn't have a clue. But it's stunning. Miami Heat now, because you've got the Wehrmacht and a burning basketball. The Dolphins, the Miami Dolphins is one. I like the colour scheme with them. I do like the Houston Texans logo, even though the team is absolutely atrocious. The Carolina Panthers, I like their logo. Will Ireland cricket get their first test win? I mean, look, they got it quicker than Bangladesh got theirs, so there is that. I think it's important for the growth of the game globally that one of the newer test teams is starting to gain some traction. But they've been banging on the door for Test cricket for a long time before they were admitted. I think the ICC made a mistake by admitting them as late as they. So Afghanistan's different, but it's basically they play in the UAE, so the UAE should have a Test team at this point. I think the Dutch will be the next team to get test status because of their exploits in the one-day game. I think the Dutch will get upgraded to Test status soon. They need some infrastructure investment in Holland in regards to bringing up their grounds to Test status. And I don't think Canada are that far away either. I think Canada and the Dutch will be the next ones to be raised a level to the Test status within the next 5 to 10 years. I think the UAE will get Test status as well at some point, again, within the next 5 to 10 years. The ICC's headquarters are in Dubai, so or is it Abu Dhabi? I think it's Dubai. So I believe that those 3 countries will be the next ones to get Test status. And Namibia play cricket at a decent one-day level as well, so there's a lot to consider there. And now with the US wanting to get their version of their T20 competition, their Premier League cricket competition underway. There is that. At least it won't be all nil pois, I suppose. I don't know what's going on there. So that's talking about team logos, but that's a very hard question to answer because there's No, no. Wales have had a couple of losing bonus points, and they're above Italy in the standings, even though they haven't won a game yet. Italy have drawn a game. I don't get that. This is where I think the bonus point structure needs to be looked at and adjusted. And Italy should have beaten France, and it was, interesting end to that game. And Jonathan Dante is now suspended, so France are just. What has gone wrong with France this Six Nations? Now, obviously, Dupont is part of the Sevens program for the Olympics. He will return to the French setup post-Olympics, and he's tearing that up. And Entamac is still not 100% fit. He's not playing at the moment, so they're on their second choice fly half and their second choice scrum half. Yeah. Can we relegate Wales and bring Georgia or Portugal? Well, it's very nice, but suddenly the relegation talks disappeared now that Wales are struggling. And if Italy had won that game against France, then Wales are deep in the shit, personally. So, yeah, it's very interesting. As soon as Wales or Scotland are the struggling teams, or potentially in the past, France and England have struggled in recent in recent decades. Suddenly, that relegation talk disappears. It's only when Italy is struggling, or potentially Scotland, that relegation. Wales are really in crisis, both with the Test side and domestic game. It's crisis, and Georgia and Portugal are having a little bit of a World Cup hangover. So are Romania and Spain. I think didn't Germany beat? Was it Germany or Belgium beat Portugal in their first rounds European Championship game? Do I think British ice hockey can qualify in the winter? Look, personally, I think Olympic participation should be based off the World Championship group, top tier, with the off that rather than a qualifying tournament. I think that should qualify you for the Winter Olympics. Personally, so that's how I would do it. The IIHF and IOC need to work out a better format for it, but it's the same when it comes to football and rugby sevens as well. That's why, even though the French basically have to play competitive internationals for the sevens program, even though they're hosting the Olympics, there needs to be a better way of doing it. But that's there's potential. Yeah, it's called winning a lot. Generally, doesn't mean we're in crisis. Ireland dominate the Six Nations. South Africa dominate the World Cup. The All Blacks aren't what they used to be. Australia's in a mess. Argentina seem to be doing okay. I wouldn't say Argentina are in crisis. There's a lot of soul searching going on in the US and Canada for failing to qualify for the World Cup. Although Canada seem to be doing quite well on the sevens, and the US doing quite in the sevens, but the 15 aside, they need to get. But in the women's game, Canada and the US do very well in the 15s and the sevens, but in the men's game, Canada and the US are struggling in the 15 aside format. Argentina were disappointed in the World Cup, but their union isn't in crisis and the club game isn't in crisis. So structurally, Argentina are okay. But you look at it, and financially, rugby union's in a mess. And Augustine Pichot has been proven right with what he was saying back in 2018 and 2019 in the build-up to the World Rugby elections where Bill Beaumont beat him. He's been proven right 4.5 years later. COVID sped up the financial meltdown that rugby union's having. I have no problem with Six Nations relegation, but it's not about that. It's about the history of the teams in it. Let's face it, holiday packages come into it as well. It's the money aspect of it. Yes, it is 24 teams at the next. It's the same amount of teams at the next World Cup. They reached a semi-final. Doesn't seem like a bad tournament to me. They didn't play particularly well in regards to getting where they didn't reach a semi-final. They reached a quarter-final. Argentina didn't make the semis. Did they? England, South Africa, New Zealand. Who was it Argentina? Did Argentina make the semis? I think they did. Wales made the quarters, got knocked out in the quarterfinals. I can't remember now. It was the big surprise. Well, the big story that came out of the World Cup was Australia failing to get out the pool stage for the first time. Much like England failing to get out the pool stage in 2015 and Ireland in 99, a tier one nation, Scotland have failed to get out the pool stage a couple of times, and Ireland in 2007. So there's been a couple of instances where a fancied nation has failed to okay, it was Argentina. I complete. That's the thing. I didn't watch the semi-finals. Oh yeah, because New Zealand played in the final. Yes, yeah, I didn't watch the semi-finals of the World Cup. I'd reached a point where I watched 2 of the 4 quarters, and then I watched the third, fourth place match in the final. So I got a bit of tournament fatigue at that point. I also think I wasn't particularly well during the World Cup. I think I had COVID again, or I was a bit under the weather at the end of last year, at the back end of last year. The length of the World Cup. I think they're making some adjustments to the tournament time frame going forward for the next one. It's the same with the Football World Cup expanding as well. That they're looking at adjusting how the group stages work and team turnaround, balancing it out, fixturing. And it's bearing in mind that over the entire history of I can't get comfortable over the entire history of the World Cup as a tournament and and the format. It's gone through expansion. It's grown. The TV deal is worth a lot more money. The various corporate sponsorship deals are worth a lot of money. The stadium infrastructure has to be of a certain standard. Wow, that is a bright light, isn't it? I'm just looking at that light. You think how bright it is. So the money that the host nation or nations, because at some point we're going to have Rugby World Cup co-hosts. That has to happen at some point. There's a co-hosting of the tournament, much like what's happening with World Championship ice hockey and football. International football, there has to be a co-hosting where they split it between nations rather than a single standalone host. They've done it. They've already done it in rugby league, for example, in the 2017 World Cup. They were co-hosts. So yes, it was and it wasn't, because Wales was the official host with some games being played in other cities, but Wales was the official host with it was, but it wasn't. It was Wales. Wales got the final, Wales got the opening game, and it was Wales with the other home nations having the odd game here or there at certain stadiums, but it was Wales's World Cup, really. But it was a UK, it was sort of, but most of the games, Wales, the Principality or the Millennium Stadium, it was a big thing. It was sort of mostly a Welsh World Cup with England and Scotland sort of getting a couple of games, but it was branded as a Welsh World Cup with a British flavour to it, home nations flavour to it, as a precursor to the Six Nations, coming the next year. As sort of a tribute to the old Four Nations in a sense, or Five Nations. I think France had a couple of games as well, if I seem to remember. But apart from that one-off sort of special kind of tournament, and England was the official host, so there's that. But I do think the Rugby Union World Cup once it's done in America, is going to be co-hosted afterwards, going into the 2030s and the 2040s. It cannot stay at the current one nation, bearing the brunt of hosting with how it's grown. Like rugby league has had co-hosts for World Cup 2017, and that's a far smaller tournament. IIHF, when it comes to World Championship Ice Hockey, which is every year, has decided to split the cost between two nations for co-hosting rights, and that's been happening now for many, many years. We've seen it with the World Cup as far back as 2002. We've seen it with the Euros as far back as 2000, Holland and Belgium, which was a blueprint for Switzerland and Austria in 2008. So I think co-hosting is going to be the way that major sports tournaments, international sporting tournaments, end up going across the boards. Spain, Portugal, and France? What co-hosting? What? Because France has just had the Rugby World Cup. They've had the Euros a couple. They've had a World Cup football. They've had the Euros. In what sport? Because they've just had rugby union. They're going to have the Olympics. They won't be bidding for a tournament for some time. This is their era of having tournaments this decade, just this last decade, where they've had the Euros and now they're going to have the Olympics. It closes out a 10-year spell where they've had a lot. I think there are some countries that can host on their own. Argentina, economically, Argentina can't do it anymore. Spain economically can't do it anymore. Hence why the next Football World Cup after the 2030 World Cup is going to be 6 nations. Argentina and Spain get games. Canada co-hosting with the US at the next Football World Cup. Ireland going to be co-hosting the Euros alongside England in a couple of years. Italy doesn't have the public money to do it. They have the stadiums, they don't have the public money. They would rely heavily on private finance and private investment in Italy is a bit of a lottery, really, when you look at the mafia and the wastage. Italy are not in an economic position to do it, and I don't think they have the interest to do it either. I think they should just host the next FIFA World Cup in San Marino. Well, maybe. Yeah, I think co-hosting is the way to go for a lot of major tournaments now. In international sport, it's just happening. It's just not sustainable for a single nation to do it. And people go, well, Canada can do one by themselves. So that's why they're co-hosting with the US and Mexico with the next Football World Cup. Okay. They could play it all in one stadium and sleep in Italy. No, because the final group stage games have to play it all at the same time, so it can't happen. You could play it in one city, perhaps, or one region, but while people, speak fondly of Italia 90, very fondly from the fan point of view, and what that meant at a very crucial time in European and global political and social history. And it was a crossroads moment for Italy, for Europe, the end of the Cold War. I think, was it the end of the Italian First Republic? And there was political upheaval in Italy at the time that led to a change in the constitution and a new republic being, that's political stuff. But the years of lead were going on. There was the Maxi trial, and then all the anti-mafia and the Borsellino and Falcone's assassinations not long after. There was a lot going on politically in Italy at the time. There was a lot going on in Europe at the time, economically and politically. There's a lot of upheaval socially, the collapse of communism, the end of the Cold War. Italia 90, people speak of Italia 90 with great fond memories because it was a great distraction from a lot of social and political and economic upheaval that was happening across Europe at the time. Same with Euro 96, same with France 98. There was a lot happening in Europe. So those 3 tournaments within 8 years of each other. And Euro 92 doesn't get the same kind of. It does, but it doesn't, because Denmark and Yugoslavia being thrown out and Denmark coming in and then winning the whole thing. Doesn't get the same feedback as the others. So, but those tournaments, 3 out of those 4 major tournaments were 4 out of the 5 major tournaments of the 90s, should I say, were in Europe. Obviously, USA 94 being the one that wasn't. And there was a lot going on, and Europe was the forefront of political and social upheaval and change, and economic change. And Sweden in 92 just doesn't really get spoken about. A, England did badly. B, the only big talking point was Denmark coming in at the last minute and Yugoslavia being thrown out because of what was happening in the Balkans and the breakup of that nation and the civil strife and the conflict in the former Yugoslavia. But Italia 90, Euro 96, and France 98, the hooligan element aside, fans across the world talk fondly of those tournaments. Very fondly. The memories made, the games, the drama, the emotion, they are fondly remembered by football fans. And, they're watershed moments. Gaz's tears in Italia 90 and Southgate's tears in Euro 96. France, what was going on in France politically at the time. There was a lot going on in France socially and politically. And, what that meant for the French people in 98. And in between, we had Euro 92 and USA 94 that were just forgettable tournaments. And then, you have what ends up happening in those other tournaments and the great storylines that come out of it and the memories made. Right, let's have I've got to slow the chat down a bit. They could play. I was only 6 months old when Italia 90 took place, so I don't remember either. I remember Euro 92 just and USA 94. I was old enough to remember them. 48 teams, next World Cup. Yeah, but when people talk about Canada at the Women's World Cup, crowds were less, they had less facilities to use, and there was less interest in women's football a decade ago. It does not compare. Does not compare with what North America is going to be facing in 2 years' time. Can't compare it. Euro 96, that was I remember that tournament very fondly. It was as a kid I was football mad, and that was a big thing back in 96. And 98 as well. I wouldn't say France struggled the entire time, but it's very interesting that all 3 goals were scored by midfielders. I actually had the replica ball. I had an England replica kit. I fondly remember France 98 as well. That was a big moment as well. Yeah, Bulgaria got to the semi-finals in 94. I think they played Sweden in the 3rd, 4th place playoff. And that was when Henrik Larsson of Celtic fame came of age. Henrik Larsson was, I think, was he the Golden Boot winner? He was definitely voted player of the tournament. I remember that much. Henrik Larsson and his dreadlocks, burst onto the international scene, and people, who is this young man from Sweden who has dreadlocks and is of a mixed background, and he's a fantastic player. Stoichkov, the famous Germany getting knocked out by Bulgaria. The Czechs in 96, yes, they made it to the final. Nedved, Karel Poborský was the Czech player of note, and he obviously ended up at Man United. I wouldn't say Bulgaria minimized, but there's definitely been a shift in where they were to where they are over the last 30 years. And you could look at the UEFA coefficient and how a lot of clubs in Eastern Europe are penalised by the UEFA coefficient. So Poborský, Romania, but again, you wait for coefficient. And how the further leagues you go, have the best talent is bled from them now with the big five leagues really, and the wages that are offered, and there just isn't the money, there isn't the state funding anymore. The former communist countries, they had a lot of state infrastructure behind them. Since the collapse of communism, there's corruption, there's the infrastructure is crumbling. There's a lot of issues, institutional issues over there. But Romania and Bulgaria in the 90s had great players, fantastic players. They still have the occasional world-class player as well. The Czech Republic, yeah, they're not the same as they were 20, 30 years ago. They're still a pretty solid outfit. Let's not kid ourselves. The Czechs still have some great players. Same with Slovakia. They still produce some great players, but they're more ice hockey. They're domestic ice hockey leagues. That they produce more ice hockey players than football players now of an elite standard that go on to the NHL. But the Czechs still have some really good players, though. It seems like West Ham has half the Czech side in it. But the Czechs aren't the team that they were when it was Czechoslovakia, and you could argue the split of the two nations in the early 90s has. Petr Cech plays for one of my local teams in ice hockey. That is true. That is very true. Volleyball. Outside of the Olympics, both indoor and beach volleyball, which is the outdoor, doesn't get any coverage outside of the Olympics for the most part. It's a great sport to play and watch, but it doesn't get the coverage outside of the Olympic cycle. I've given it a go. I've given volleyball a go. I'm just not of the right. I wouldn't say physicality, because I'm not the right height to do it. You've got to be very, very tall and very, very athletic. You've got to have height. You've got to be like basketball level height to really be an effective volleyball player. So I haven't got the right physical attributes to be a volleyball player. But I have played it at school. It was good fun. People say Greece has fallen off, but Greece in 04 just showed up and parked the bus. I wouldn't say it's part of the bus. There was a bit about them. They had organisation. They had fitness. They had a team togetherness, and they bought into the system. They bought into the system that Otto Rehhagel had in place. They bought into that system, and they just got on a run, and they worked out a way to win. Was it attractive? No, but they had a handful of really talented players that were very, very good on set plays and on counter attacks, and that's all you need. They were happy without the ball. They were happy to play a defensive style and grind out a win. If it was a 1-0, it was a 1-0. Basically smash and grab. They were happy to have few opportunities in front of goal, but they did have a handful of players that were class players. Samaras, Stelios Giannakopoulos, Nikos Dabezas. I forget the goalkeeper. There were a couple of players that play at a decent level. Shistersties, yeah, there were some decent players, and they still qualify for tournaments. I mean, they're still occasionally get to knockouts. But to recapture that 04 style of play football's evolved in 20 years. In the last 20 years, football has evolved and changed even again. I don't think you can play that style again. Because you go through these various, style of play changes, and the most effect. You have to have a bit more about you than just playing for a 1-0 day in, day out. There is a bit more to Greek football now than there was then, but other nations have kicked on, and the domestic game in Greece is all over the place at the moment. I'm kind of glad we lost to Portugal, because the players would have had to go into hiding if they lost to Greece in the final. But the Portuguese had to beat the Dutch in the semis, so we would have had to beat the Dutch in order to play Greece. And I don't think at that time England could have beaten the Dutch. There were some players in that Dutch side that had lost 4-1 to England in Euro 96. So there were some players in that England side that had beaten Holland 4-1 in Euro 96. England playing Holland in a semi at that time with the Dutch side that was available at the time, I don't know. But again, the Dutch would have had to go into hiding if they lost to Greece in the final. Same with England. Whoever played in that final, this is where Ronaldo's international reputation on the international stage took as long as it did until 2016 for him to, get to that pinnacle again. It just didn't happen in World Cups and Euros for him. Yeah, Portugal were the hosts. Yes, that went down like a sack of shit, didn't it? And the Portuguese side was smashed in the media, but they were hosts and they made the final. And I think that was very early on in Ronaldo's career. And that it's the same with Messi in his career as well, with Argentina struggling at the 2006 World Cup. Well, they didn't struggle, but they didn't. They got knocked out in penalties against Germany, one of the worst games I've ever seen. Yet in the group stages, they were passing the ball round. They beat Mexico in an epic in the second round, and the German penalty shootout was that, and the scenes at the end. Well, yeah, the way it's not that you lose as hosts; it's the manner of the defeat. So yeah, Brazil losing in the semi is not the end of the world. It's the way they lost the game to Germany and how but that Brazil side, the fans were criticising the way Brazil were playing even in victory when they were winning games, going, this team is shit. So there was always that negativity that the press built upon. And circulated that this Brazil team is crap. They made a semi-final, and then they fell apart. Yeah, I mean, they could have ground there, but Brazil in the media and their relationship with the fans since '94 hasn't been as good as people think. The Brazil '94 team that wins the World Cup was criticised by Brazilian fans for being un-Brazilian in their style of play. The team that lost the '98 World Cup was criticised. The team that wins in 2002 was criticised. So since '94 till now, the style of football that Brazil plays classed as un-Brazilian. And certain squads like 2014, 2010, 90, even winning squads have been criticised. But 2010 and 2014, they have been hammered by their own fans. Hammered. And there's a reason why they haven't won since 2002. There's a reason that they haven't achieved what, with the quality of players that comes out of Brazil year on year, they should win the World Cup every year, it seems. But they can't. And they underachieve, I think, badly. They weren't as heavily criticised for what they dished up at the last World Cup, but 2010 and 2014, they were getting hammered by their fans. Before a ball was even kicked in either tournament, they were getting brutalised by their fans, going, this team is un-Brazilian in the style of play they're playing. Same in '94 when they won the World Cup. Same in '94. Yet when I was growing up, the '94 to 2002 Brazil was apparently the best team ever to play in Europe. But in Brazil, it wasn't. But look at it, the Brazilians have figured out how to defend, which made them more dangerous. So they've got all the skill and the attacking players. They figured out how to defend. And that was what was scary about Brazil in that 8-year spell, was they figured out the 90-minute game. You can attack, but you have to defend. They figured out the two-way game. And it was they made 3 consecutive finals, winning 2 of them. That's the reason. I think Germany could have scored 10. That they could have scored 14. I can't believe it's 10 years ago either. But look what's happened to Germany now. What crime in Brazil skyrocketed? Potentially, yes. But can you imagine a Brazil-Argentina final? I mean, Christ, that would have ended in a riot. Honestly, a Brazil-Argentina final. I think the authorities were kind of glad Brazil got knocked out. I think the actual authorities in Brazil, I think the security forces were glad that Brazil didn't make the final for security purposes because they would have played Argentina, which is everyone's dream final. Is Brazil-Argentina or England-Germany would be everyone's dream international finals. One of those two, either England-Germany or Brazil-Argentina, just for the TV view, just for the marketing you could have in that, the TV viewership globally. England-Germany Europe would be glued to the TV screens. Brazil-Argentina, you imagine either of those being a final. The policing presence alone would eat into any profits that whatever tournament's just made. But you look at it, those are the two dream finals for neutrals, including the fans of the nations concerned. But they will be the dream finals for the neutral. Absolutely. Tickets would go like that. Fan zones would be packed. But the concern would be from the security forces, that would be the police and, army, basically. Those, doing the security, so the anti-terror police, the general police, and of course the armed forces doing their bit as supplementary security. Their commanders would be ripping their hair out, going, Christ. They would be really the amount of public on the street. That would be a security nightmare. But it'd be everyone's dream final. The TV viewership would the internet would go into meltdown. The TV stations would probably get record viewership. So yeah. Brazil struggling. Yeah, Brazil just something's happened with Brazil. Something's happened with Germany. Something's happened. I think that's with certain national side setups who've been very successful. Italy, Germany, and Brazil they've had a lot of success internationally. Yet they are not performing very well. And there are major issues, and the spotlight goes on the players and the coaches and the tactics employed and the style of play. And there is like an inquest. It's the end of the world. It really isn't, but it is. Is it surprising we've never had a Brazil-Argentina final? What, in the World Cup? Yes. In the Copa Libertadores, is the Copa Libertadores or the Copa America? We have, but in the World Cup we haven't. It is surprising. In the World Cup we haven't since 1930. It's never happened. That is stunning. Imagine England v Scotland. Oh, Christ. That's not likely in either football or rugby right now. Because in rugby they're classed as tier 1 nations, so they would have to meet in the knockout stages before the World Cup with how seeding goes, because they're both classed as 6-nation Europeans teams when it comes to seeding. Can't happen in the Rugby World Cup unless they're in opposite ends of the draw, which doesn't seem to happen quite regularly, although England seem to get Wales a lot in the pool stages. And then if, in theory, Scotland were to progress past, I believe, the quarter, it would only happen in the semi-finals or quarterfinals they would meet right now with how form trajectory goes and stuff. But we don't know what the pool stages are going to look like for the next World Cup. Am I right in thinking England v Scotland is the biggest rivalry in Britain? It's the oldest sporting rivalry at international level. The oldest international is, I believe, rugby union with what is now the Calcutta Cup. And then the second oldest is association football. And then, they're the two oldest internationals. is rugby and football, and it's between England and Scotland. So there's that. But no, the head-to-head is ridiculous. The rivalry is what it is. I think the media tries to hype it up even more, without necessarily, doing much to an already intense rivalry. I think in rugby union it's become very, very friendly, but football will always be tinged with that nasty disorder side of things, that and the sectarian and then the political element. It's quite nasty, but we'll see what happens in the Euros in the summer with both England and Scotland, and how both sides progress. There's a lot of pressure on Southgate and England. Scotland less so, but Steve Clarke has restored a lot of pride in the jersey, and their objective is to get out the pools, to get out the group stage, and win, I would say, at least 2 games. If Scotland can get into the knockout stages and, let's say, quarterfinals, I think would be a good objective for them. That's a successful tournament for Scotland. Steve Clarke has restored pride in the national side, restored their fortunes, and the results speak for themselves with how they're playing. But tournament side of things, they need to get out of the group, and they need to make the quarterfinals to say that's a successful tournament for Scotland with objectives. Anything after that, I think, is a bonus. And if Scotland gets momentum with how they've been playing, semi-final and final is not without the realms of possibility. Same in rugby. Wales seem to get Australia a lot. Yes, they do, and that cannot be good. Cannot be good. I think the last 3 World Cups, Wales and Australia have seemed to draw each other, which is a bit interesting. But in that period, Wales have been quite a good side, whereas Australia have been a declining team in the same period where they finished in the Rugby Championship. So Wales, until the last couple of years, have been doing quite well in the Six Nations. Australia finishing 3rd or even 4th in the Rugby Championship, where the other nations are doing a lot better than them, which impacts seeding when it comes to the Tier 1 nations. But there needs to be a bit more randomisation, in my opinion, when it comes to the Tier 1 nations, because they're constantly it seems to me that Scotland and South Africa play each other quite a lot. England seem to get Argentina quite a lot in World Cups recently. There needs to be a bit more randomisation. There needs to be. It's becoming a dead cert that certain nations are always going to be, like Namibia and New Zealand seem to always be in the same pool lately, regardless of where they are in the world rankings and like a Tier 2, Tier 3 nation, Tier 1 nation. They seem to play each other in the pool stages every World Cup, it seems, which is not always the case, but it seems like that. Lately, we seem to get Georgia. Seem to get who do they seem to get all the time? Although Georgia seems to be a bit more, randomized, but Uruguay seem to get Fiji. Just how it seems to work out. I'm not saying that is the case, but it does seem to me Uruguay are an interesting one. Georgia are an interesting one, but Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji seem to get the same opposition as well. So it's interesting how that seems to play out. If you make the quarterfinals or 3rd place in your pool, you don't have to go through the qualification process again. So that's where I think Scotland and Italy are lucky. Portugal as well getting their first win. Portugal were the refresher for me at this World Cup. They were refreshing to watch. Fiji were refreshing to watch. But you can see the drop off now in quality level internationally past a certain point. And for all the success of the international game, when I say that compared to rugby league, you can see the drop off. It is the same in football. It seems certain nations seems to get drawn against each other. There was a period where England played Romania quite a bit. I believe it was in '98 and 2000. We seemed to have a bit of a in the same groups at the same time. England and Portugal seem to have constantly come against each other earlier on in tournaments. There's going to be, I will agree with that, but there does seem to be, when it comes, to international sport, it seems to be the same teams in the early stages of tournaments meeting each other almost on a regular. And I know with certain tournament formats, IHF ice hockey, for example, you are limited in what you can do with only two groups in the round robin stage before the knockouts. And with only two new nations coming in each year and two nations getting relegated each year, you basically have the same nations apart from two differences every year. That limits what you can do. I get that. But when it comes to Rugby World Cups, Football World Cups, Euros, Rugby League World Cups, World Sevens, various tournament formats in other international sports, there could be a bit more variation when it comes to randomizing the group stages or pool stages of tournaments. God, Australia, Wales, Fiji, Uruguay, Namibia. I mean, you probably be right on that one. Obviously, Uruguay, Namibia, have to go through the qualification process. Australia, Wales, and Fiji have already qualified because Fiji and Wales made the quarterfinals and Australia are the hosts. So that would if you call that, and in 3 years' time that is what we have. I will be, stunned, absolutely stunned. But there's a lot of rugby to be played between now and 2027. A lot is going to happen in that time frame until that World Cup. A lot's going to happen in regards to the club game, the finances of the sport. A lot can happen in that time. But if that is the pool, if that is Australia's pool with Wales, Fiji, Uruguay, Namibia, I'll be like, well, okay, Namibia and Uruguay play each other again. Oh, where have we seen that before? But they're not playing New Zealand this time around. Fantastic, but that would be. I think for all the nations involved, they'll be like, what is going on? We keep facing each other at this level in the tournament on the regular. That's got to come a point where familiarity breeds contempt. It does impact TV ratings. It will impact because you're getting the same all the time. It's like, well, this is what it is. I think it should be host in A1 and just random for everyone else. Why not England, France, Africa, New Zealand? That would be hilarious. Several tier one nations, getting knocked out before the quarterfinals and having to qualify for the next World Cup. That would be absolutely hilarious. Certainly get most of it right. Probably it's all a bit predictable. I get bored playing these nations all the time. I want to see Wales play other nations. South Africa getting Scotland a lot. Yeah, that is true. They have. But you've got to look at the fact that the USA and Canada didn't qualify for the first time ever, which impacts, who gets what in the pool stages. Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa, have had their moments at test level where they beat in tier one nations. Uruguay have massively improved. Chile, obviously, with the first time qualification. So there were some new faces there. Chile being the debutants, Portugal making their second World Cup. So there were some new nations there, which is important. But for the most part, it's the same 16 or 17 teams, and then there'll be a couple of others who make a reappearance or their first appearance at a World Cup. But for the most part, it's pretty regular who's going to qualify. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice to see a resurrection of the American Nations Championship, which had Canada and the US in it since 2019. That's not taken place because of COVID, which I think has had a positive and a negative impact on nations. Negative on the US and Canada, positive for Chile and Uruguay. Brazil competed in that competition, and the Brazilian setup is structured. It's there. So there is that. I don't know how they're going to factor it, but I think they're going to look at trying to mitigate the tournament being too long and balance the scheduling. So, but it'd be interesting to see, if there's some new nations getting in there or returning to the World Cup after a bit of an absence. But it's always good to see new nations appear and new rivalries form. But when you get the same, we've been selected in the same pool or group again against each other for the third, fourth successive tournament, that's where you're going, this is just getting too much. 6 groups of 4, I think, so I need to take Namibia out. But either way, you look at it and it's the same nations facing off, but you are limited when you've got less depth outside the top 16, top 20 nations in the international game, whereas in association football, the depth is so deep with international depth at international level that you get so many more nations and you get more randomisation when it comes to the group stages. Whereas in rugby union and rugby league, you are limited. Cricket, you're limited. Ice hockey, you're limited at that top level. After that, the quality level just drops off a cliff. And so you want the games to be as competitive and as balanced as possible, where there is a fair balance and a fair competition where it's not going to be blowout scores in every game. Football seems to have eliminated the blowouts a lot of the time, but rugby league and rugby union and ice hockey haven't eliminated those blowout scores. So there's a question of this is where football has become the global game, where the quality is so spread out now with superstar players playing in every continent, and you could argue that you could have several world all-star teams take a field, a continental all-stars team take a field, and every continent be pretty competitive, no blowout scores. Whereas in the other major international sports, you still get blowout scores in the team competitions. Did you watch any of the AFCON? No, not this time round. I did a couple of years ago, but I wasn't impressed 2 years ago. I didn't watch any this time round. And I heard that the quality was shocking. The quality level wasn't great this time round, I've heard. So I'm kind of glad I dodged a bullet with that one, but I heard it was pretty dreadful. But it is what it is. That's the format they've gone with. And I don't mind AFCON being every 2 years. It's something we've got so accustomed to and used to, but the quality level is generally pretty shocking. It's not great. It wasn't great a couple of years ago. Apparently, it was even worse this time round. Yeah, individually, you got some very talented players, some world-class players. Some great players have come out of Africa who've been world-class. But the quality level was shocking. Absolutely shocking. From everything I've read, it was a terrible tournament. But I wouldn't say it's bad. They get noticed, and it's an opportunity for those players to earn a real good living and have a good quality of life. And some players and ex-players like Drogba and Eto'o and George Ware and others have got involved in politics or charitable foundations and business and done a lot for their home communities and home nations post retirement. But God, the quality level was shocking. The last, I don't think. I mean, there've been some great goals scored, and there's been some great stories coming out of the African Cup of Nations over the years, but the quality level is great. Isn't great. The French seem to poach the most eligible players. That is true. That's a well-known fact. The Portuguese have poached a few over the years as well, but mostly the French and Belgium as well. But and that's to do with the waves of African immigration to France and Belgium, over the years. But the so yeah, there is that. But then the best talent that doesn't get poached by those countries for the international game gets poached by the clubs. And it does mean that they can earn a real good living and have a good standard of living, and they do send money back home, and there is that. But for many in could you say the developing world or Africa and South America and in certain parts of Asia, it's an escape from poverty. Especially South America and Africa, it's an escape from shanty towns and poverty and crime and political violence. It's an escape, and it's a way to get out of poverty, and it that's why they take up playing. Even if in the domestic leagues in Africa and South America, they may not be getting paid the European money, they're still getting paid more than the people in the neighbourhood. So for them, it is an escape from poverty, and so there is that. Yeah, but Brahim Diaz also has like Moroccan heritage, so that let's not get into that. I'm guessing that the Asian Cup is not a great standard as Qatar won it back to back and they looked garbage at the World Cup, which is why the Euros and Copa America is where the most talent is. Hell, Norway stole. No. Haaland's parents are Norwegian. Yes, he was born in Leeds. And could have played for Leeds, and obviously ended up at Man City, where his dad also played. But he was born in Leeds, Leeds General Infirmary, I believe, and he spent a lot of his childhood here. But he started his professional career for Molde in Norway, so he actually went back to Norway to start his career. And his parents are Norwegian, and he was brought up speaking Norwegian. He's bilingual, but he was brought up speaking Norwegian at home. So, but most Norwegians speak a good English. I wouldn't say Norway stole him. He could have played for us, yes, by virtue of being born here, but his parents are Norwegian, and he started his career in Norway, then goes to Germany, then ends up here. So it's a bit tongue in cheek, that one, but what I represent, technically, while I was born there, and in theory I could, I don't have a German passport, and I haven't been resident in Germany since I was like 2. So unless it would have to be under the residency at that point, and I haven't lived there for a long time. And with my registration, I was still registered as a British citizen, not as a dual national. So I avoided conscription into the German armed forces at the time when it was mandatory, and because I was still in that age generation where it was mandatory until No, I think my birth year it was mandatory until now. So I'm now 34, so it's now no longer mandatory. So there we go. It's now optional if you're born in 1980. Yeah, so I was part of that generation where it was still mandatory. Being born in '89, um, I could shit. That's a good question. I think under German to represent Germany, I think potentially Owen Hargreaves could have played for Germany, even though he was technically had a Canadian parent and played for England. He qualified for England by the grandparent rule because his parents were both born in Canada and he was born in West Germany, again on a military base like me. And I believe, was it his dad who was in the Canadian Army? But yeah, Owen Hargreaves played for us, but had never lived in England up until that point. He was playing for Bayern Munich. He was born. Oh shit! Where was he born? Born in Germany, playing for Munich. Didn't move to England until he got signed by Manchester United. Never lived in England. Never lived in England. But played for England. We will. No, in that case, then I couldn't go the grandparent rule. But remember Aaron Birchall? Remember him? He used to play for Port Vale, played for Trinidad and Tobago in 2006 at the World Cup. You know why? He was born in Trinidad when his parents were on holiday. He was a premature baby, and his mum went into labour a month and a half early, and he was born in Trinidad. Which is why he plays for Trinidad and Tobago, or did. I think he's retired now, Aaron Birchall. Can't believe it's 18 years since the 2006 World Cup. But Aaron Birchall, I think he was a Walsall player at the time, or was he Port Vale? I can't remember. He was either Port Vale or Walsall he was playing for at the time. And he was selected. He was playing in League One. And he was selected to play for Trinidad and Tobago. He played some of the qualifiers, and you got this lad from the West Midlands with a very, very, very noticeable regional accent. And I think it was called Trinidad and Tobago. Oh, tobacco. Yes, yes. I used to make. I think tobacco. I think that's where the word tobacco actually comes from. Is Tobago. I think. But no, that's where Calypso comes from as well. And Brian Lara, Brian Lara, Calypso, and Aaron Birchall, and Shaka Hislop. There you go. Shaka Hislop, brilliant goalkeeper. I've met Shaka Hislop, great player, great pundit over in North America now, where he's great servant to the game. Yeah. Yes, he does. He does punditry for. Is it NBC? And he's very, very good. He's the older version of Micah Richards with his enthusiasm and his energy. I really rate Shaka Hislop as a pundit. He works for American. I believe it is NBC Universal. Works for them on their Premier League and international football coverage. He did a lot of work at the World Cup just gone. He does covers a lot of the international tournaments, like the Gold Cup, Euros, and World Cup. He's fantastic, and he's very insightful and witty. He's very, very good. I do like watching him. He collapsed. I don't think he had a stroke, but he did collapse. He had a health scare. It was either low blood pressure or vertigo. Something happened. I think it was a stroke. I think it was Glenn Hoddle had the heart attack live on air for BT Sport a couple of years ago. He was taken unwell very suddenly. He collapsed. I don't think it was a stroke. He might have kept his health. What actually caused it, behind closed doors privately, because obviously, he's a very open character. I think health needs to be respected. For us, he needs to be respected. But he was live on air and he collapsed, which was quite scary. But they got to him very, very quickly, and he's still with us and he's still doing his work. Micah Richards is brilliant. I like his enthusiasm and his energy and what he brings to the table. Obviously, Ian Wright is calling it a day at the end of this season. I mean, Ian Wright's in his 60s now. People don't realise how old Ian Wright actually is. He looks very young, but Ian Wright's decided to wind it down and call it a day. I think Ian Wright is now 60, but Micah Richards has taken on that role really well, and I can see at some point Micah Richards becoming the main host. I can see Micah Richards replacing like a Gary Lineker or a Mark Pougatch, for example, when it comes to presenting ITV or BBC's coverage. Or, I can see Micah Richards. He's on the BBC at the moment, but I can see him becoming the main host of Match of the Day and the live broadcasts. I can see Micah Richards potentially Football Focus and Final Score. I can see Micah Richards becoming the main guy in 5-10 years' time. I could see that being a thing. I can also see him and Jermaine Genius. I mean, Jermaine Genius did the AFCON 2 years ago, but I can see him and Jermaine Genius becoming a very good working partnership alongside Alan Shearer, if Alan Shearer wants to keep doing it for a little bit longer. I missed Alan Hansen. I grew up watching Alan Hansen as a pundit. It's sad that he decided to walk away from the media game. He was very, very good. Very good, very knowledgeable. I wouldn't say he was outspoken, but he was to the point. And his words carried weight and others listened. But he decided to call it a day before the social media era really took off. I miss Mark Lawrenson as well, I think. And they were teammates in the same Liverpool side. So I find that interesting that Alan Hansen called it a day when he did and walked away from the media side of things when he did. But I feel sorry for how Mark Lawrenson was dealt with when he was sort of phased out. Yeah, but he was good at his sarcasm. That was his trademark. He was the sarcastic, let's call it out. That's a dive. That's a blatant foul. That's blatant play acting. And he would do it in a sarcastic way where he would really mock the players for rolling around on the floor. Brilliant. Alan Hansen would go, that's not proper tackle. Alan Hansen and Mark Lawrenson were brilliant. But when Alan Hansen left, Mark Lawrenson looked lost. Because they used to play together for the same Liverpool team. People forget that. I do miss. But look, Chris Kamara's obviously his health has failed him, and we wish him the best. I mean, I've met Cammy; he's brilliant. Jeff. I mean, Jeff Stelling, I think, was going to retire anyway, and then he decided to go one more year, and then Cammy fell ill, and it was very nice, but it did have an impact on Jeff Stelling when he decided, you know what, I'm not going to go anymore. But I think he could see the writing on the wall with Sky, and this is after the Comcast purchase of Sky B and the restructuring, which we have been seeing over the last few years with Sky Sports Tennis, Sky Sports F1, and how they've restructured the Sky Sports package. That was going to happen under Comcast, and it's happening. And the lineup changes. So Soccer Saturday, Soccer AM, what's happening with Sky Sports News and how they've been very noticeably changing the lineups, program formats, dropping programming altogether, changing Sky Sports Arena, Sky Sports F1, Sky Sports Tennis, the change of the TV deal for Rugby League. This was all part of Comcast's restructuring when they announced it. They're now doing job cuts. So, yeah, John Motson, of course, he's now sadly passed away, John Motson. And, again, he retired because of ill health. He had cancer a couple of times in the last decade or so. So, that ultimately led to his retirement from commentary. His health wasn't great, and it was only when they did the John Watson documentary that I knew he had cancer. I didn't realise he survived cancer. Back in the day, I watched Soccer Saturday most weeks. Couldn't imagine watching football scores for hours now. Yeah, I'm going to start calling it a day. It's 8 o'clock now. I need to hang me washing up. And get a bite to eat. So I'm gonna call it. Plus, my internet connection has been really weird. So I don't know if it's been lagging for you guys and if there's been some connectivity issues. But I've had issues with my Wi-Fi today, and it's not because of Wi-Fi signal from the little dongle modem to my laptop. It's actually the actual signal for satellite and through the local mast, which is literally there. There's another one there. There have been some issues. We've had a lot of rain. And we had hail yesterday. It's been trying to snow. We've had a lot of rain, so maybe that's having an impact. Is the bad weather we've been having? That's very noticeable. I've had to reset my little mini modem, my little dongle, a couple of times in the last couple of days. But the signal is mid-strength, so I hope there hasn't been any lag and any issues with the stream. Sometimes it's the tech that lets us down rather than me not doing it. But I'm glad that you guys have noticed and have been positive about the camera and the sound and the picture quality. It's again something that the old laptop just started to fail. Really started to fail, and it just expired. It just died. So yeah, so long overdue that we got the Chromebook in the end. I noticed over a lengthy period of time there were a lot of comments, even going back to 2018 and 2019 when I used to get the whiteboard out regularly, that people can't see the writing. There's the glare off the screen onto the whiteboard, and the writing is difficult to read. It's more for my benefit, which is why I rely more on the notebooks now. But it was very noticeable that I was getting comments, 5-6 years ago about the picture and sound quality. And again, it was just, I got a laptop I could afford at the time. If I could have, I would have got a higher resolution camera at the time, full HD, but that was far too expensive at the time. Whereas this, okay, was a bit pricey, and I've got to pay my mum a fair chunk of change, but actually wasn't as expensive as the top range Chromebooks that we're talking. I think one of them was going for £1,500, and I mean that would have definitely had 4 or 8K quality camera, and far more than I actually need. All I need is a camera to work, good sound quality, good microphone, good picture quality. We've got that. I don't need the cloud storage, because when I record a video, I upload it, then I delete that, and then I record the next one, then I upload, then I delete the video file. So I don't need loads of storage. I don't need this and that. I've got my Google account. So basically, I've not got the basic one. I've got a pretty decent one. It's going to last me a few years, and it will do me until maybe I can have multi-screen set up with multiple laptops and going with multiple sports and multiple monitors. But that's for if the channel becomes a massive success and I'm a multi-millionaire, which I don't think is going to happen. I enjoy having this as a hobby. Obviously in the morning I'm going to be waking up really early to watch the 2 NRL games in Vegas. And I messaged my mate Dan, who actually lives on the West Coast in Sacramento, but they've had terrible weather on the West Pacific Coast. They've got really shocking weather over there. Heavy snow, heavy rain, strong winds, storm warnings in place. We're talking ridiculous amounts of snow and rain for the Pacific Northwest all the way down to the central coast of California. So we're talking the Bay Area. Shocking weather conditions. How mental health? What is that? What is positive? I've had some ups and downs. Lately, the last couple of weeks has been better because I was doing different duties at work for a week. I had 4 days on holiday, and then I was doing handing out to residents deliveries of our refuse bags. We don't have wheelie bins on things at the moment, apart from garden. My local council's a mess. So a lot of the stuff is in rubbish bags that we pick up off the side of the street and then put in a collection bin that we whack on the back of the truck. So it's a bit backwards. It's a bit 1950s, but we're getting there. Health-wise, still having issues with my shoulder and back, and my knees are playing up, but that's the damp weather. So I need to have my knees looked at. I believe I have osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis. My knees are in a terrible state. My shoulder's in a terrible state, and when it's damp like it is, if it was dry and cold, my joints don't hurt. So when it's damp and cold, so winter basically, the winter we've had has been agony. So it's not been particularly pleasant. But mentally wise, I've had a bit of a less stressful time at work the last couple of weeks. But we'll see how that goes in the next little while. I'm going to need surgeries. So physical won't get better without having like bits of my body lopped to pieces by a guy wearing rubber gloves and a scalpel. There's going to have to be surgeries in the next while. At some point, most likely, I'm going to have to pay for surgery, which is why I hope this channel starts working. Because I can't afford private healthcare at the moment. So yeah, it's not great on the physical side of things. Mentally, having a change of pace at work for the last couple of weeks, and having a bit of time off, has helped a little bit. Less stress now with the new laptop, that's helping. Not worried about rent this month and bills this month, that's helping. Otherwise, it's just generally been the second half of February was all right, but the mental health side of things, I've had some struggles. I need to do my annual mental health video, the annual public service announcement, PSA, Pathé News, men's mental health. I should actually try and do like one with a bit of humour tinged into it, where I do the video in black and white and have the crackly Pathé News, public service announcement. This is public service announcement by the Ministry of Health. But no, jokes aside, I've had a few ups and down days. Not going to lie. Today it's a Saturday, so I'm a bit less stressed. Work yesterday wasn't too bad, apart from I got absolutely soaked and felt absolutely miserable. And as soon as I load my last bit and we go on break, the sun came out. It was dreadful. As soon as I got in the truck at 6 a.m, it pissed down with rain, and it stopped raining when I get out the truck to have a cigarette at the end of my shift. The sun comes out, but working absolutely drowned. Miserable day yesterday. I mean, look, it's not been the best few months. I'm going to admit, the best 4 or 5 months. It's been a bit of a grind since, I would say, September till now. It's not been great. I think the weather's had something to do with it. It's basically rained consistently since the end of June, beginning of July last year, all the way through, apart from I think 2, maybe 3 cold spells. We had a brief period in September, which was quite nice. Then we had the 2 cold spells where we had ice and snow. Potentially more wintry conditions coming with cold weather forecast for the next couple of weeks. But the year before, so 2022, we were melting. Everything was on fire. I think we're going to have a summer like 2 years ago. I think we're going to have a very, very hot summer. I think we could see the temperature records tumble again. I think we could see lack of rainfall again. Because in 2022, we had similar winter where it just rained all the time. Same in 2019, 2020's winter. It rained all the time. And then 2020, during the summer lockdown, it was ridiculously hot. Same with 2017, 2018, really shit weather all the time. And then 2018, summer was ridiculously hot. And then the following summer was a bit wetter. Following summer hot, then wetter, then hot. I think we're going to have a roasting hot summer, and not in a good way. I think I think we're going to have some health heat warnings in place. I think we're going to have a lot of heathland and woodland and grassland fires again. So we'll see. We'll see. But anyway, I'm going to call that a stream. Thank you very much for all the questions. We've discussed a lot of stuff. And I want to circle back to what we started on. What did I start? What did we start on this evening? I think we discussed. I haven't really discussed Major League Baseball that much this evening. I did make a brief reference to the Nike Fanatics jersey. The Fanatics manufactured Nike jerseys that Major League Baseball and their trousers being seen. Being an absolute, check it out. Major League Baseball Fanatics, Nike Fanatics, the playing kit's been a disaster. A lot of negative publicity the last couple of weeks since training camp started. Players are complaining about the quality of their equipment. Obviously, we started on the discussion surrounding player misbehavior. Obviously, the NRL games in Vegas and the potential for the TV audience and how much money is going to be made and ticket sales. I'm looking forward to that. I'll be awake nice and early in the morning, so I'm going to be hitting the sack in a bit. Well, I'm going to have a bite to eat before I go to bed, hang my washing up, and then we obviously discussed a fair bit, but I urge you guys to look at the Major League Baseball uniform fiasco that Major League Baseball is facing, the PR backlash against Nike and Fanatics has really been there. Fans are pissed off, players are pissed off, the league is on the defensive. And then you've got Rob Manfred saying, I'm going to be hanging around for a little while. You're thinking, oh, God. So there's that. One last thing. This is his last year. I can't see him going much further. Same with Nadal. It's his last year. I can see the changing of the guard. Djokovic is the last one left, and the new guard is coming. And I think Djokovic doesn't have much longer left either at the top level. I think the surgeries that Nadal and Murray have had, I'm surprised they are still playing. I'm surprised with the surgeries and the injuries they have had that they are still playing. At all. They've had great careers. Look at the amount of championships between the two of them. Nadal's obviously more successful with his dominance on clay. You take his clay dominance out, he's still a fantastic player, one of the world's greatest ever. But I'm surprised they're even still playing at all. I'm surprised they haven't retired at this stage. But Nadal's already said this is his last year. Murray, I think he's dropped a few hints. This is his last year. He may go around next year, but one of his interviews he gave the other week, he was basically hinting at this is it. This is the tail end now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens if Murray makes an announcement saying I'm retiring. But I think the US Open will be his last. That's it. I think he finishes at the US Open at the end of the year in September, October, Flushing Meadows. I can't see him really giving the French Open a go at Roland Garros. He's not a great clay court player. I can see him giving it a bash at Wimbledon one last time and just going all guns blazing and just giving everything at Wimbledon and Queens. And then I can see him calling it a day at the end of the US. But he's not made an official announcement. But every interview he gives is basically slowly dropping those hints that this is it, guys. This is the farewell tour in the next 12 months. So he might go to the Australians next year, but I think he may have played his last Australian Open. Maybe he retires at the end of Wimbledon in the summer. So we'll see what happens, but I don't think he's long for professional tennis. Anyway, thank you very much, and I will have more content for you guys tomorrow after the NRL Vegas games are concluded. I will do my review of the NRL Vegas games where I just do them both in one and say, this is the good things, this is the bad things, this is where I think they can get better, this is where they surprised me. I won't go in depth into the match reviews, but I will do a video following the conclusion of the Roosters Broncos game, and we will go from there. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will have obviously content for you tomorrow. But from me for now, it is goodbye. And I'm just going to end the stream in 3, 2, 1. Bye for now.